What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto summons Fukasaku? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. Jiraiya looked behind his shoulder at the blonde kid dragging his feet after him. The toad sage sighed and massaged his white brow. He had yet to see Naruto so down. The blonde 13 years old was normally a bouncing ball of sunshine to the point it was even annoying to most. But right now, he looked like life had been sucked out of him. Jiraiya could understand and actually sympathize. Experiencing treason was world-shaking, but when the traitor was someone you considered a friend, it was worse. When the aforementioned friend tried to murder you, the toad sage did not have the words anymore. And he wrote books as a hobby. He knew he had to discuss the matter with the kid if only to clear the gunk from his system and at best to rid him of the disillusions Jiraiya knew Naruto was nursing. The problem was to be tactful about it. The toad sage denied it at every turn, but he did write little more than pornography. There was nothing tactful about that. The two walked in silence down the dusty road. Jiraiya had no clear goal in mind yet, and there was no point choosing one until Naruto was back on his feet. Walking had, however, the added benefit of helping the toad sage to think. After several hours of rather uncomfortable silence, as far as Jiraiya was concerned at least, the man reached the only logical conclusion available to him. If he wasn't sage enough to talk with Naruto, he would ask someone wiser to help him. It was hurting his pride to admit to that, but, after hours of agonizing reflection, Jiraiya found that he refused to do wrong by the kid. He could not any more than he already had. He refused to repeat the mistakes of his own teacher, make Kami have his soul. He refused to abandon the boy again. There was no time for cowardice and inadequacy, not when doing so meant the boy's death. Naruto had been dealt one of the shittiest hand in life Jiraiya had ever seen and had been getting the short end of the stick for too long. The boy deserved anything he could get, and as his teacher, it was Jiraiya's duty to ensure that if Naruto needed a sage would visit him. Jiraiya felt the satisfaction of reaching an important decision and allowed an easy smile to grace his lips. There was agony in hesitation and peace in choice, and the man found he was happy. Allowing his good mood to show, the toad sage started singing one of the numerous ballads he knew. Night eventually came, the sun setting over the immense forest of Fire Country. Made darker than it really was due to the gigantic trees, the obscurity forced the toad sage and his apprentice to stop. Naruto had been despondent for the entire day, and when the blonde boy finally found sleep, Jiraiya was relieved to not see him lifelessly staring at nothing. The blonde had cerulean blue eyes that looked entirely wrong when empty of their usual spark. Looking over at the boy and giving his sleeping form a sad smile, the toad sage rose and formed a cross with the extended index and middle fingers of both hands. Jiraiya searched within him for his chakra, the mystical energy that allowed him feats impossible for untrained men. With a poof of smoke, a perfect replica of the toad sage came in existence. The original nodded once and departed. Jiraiya walked for a good while, putting as much distance as he could between his camp and the sleeping boy. The technique he was going to use would use a massive amount of chakra, and he did not want to risk waking Naruto up. Reaching a rather large clearing, the man decided it was as good a spot as any other to call for the help he needed. Once again needing his chakra to amplify its strength, Jiraiya spun it within his pathways until it welled immensely, slowly escaping from the tenketsu around his body despite the tight control he exerted over it, forming a thin halo of light around his form. Suddenly the sage nicked his thumb on a knife and willed the energy through several hand signs, before slamming the injured hand on the ground. Smoke exploded upward and engulfed the sage's form as wind blew from the point of impact, shaking the trees around the clearing and making their branches groan in protest. When the smoke cleared, the sage was crouching in front of a toad. A very bizarre toad, as it was propped up on its two back legs, draped in a gray cloak, and sported a white goatee and two very bushy and spiky eyebrows. Fukasaku-sama, greeted Jiraiya. Thank you for answering my call. Good evening Jiraiya, the toad said in return. It's rare for you to give me the, sama, treatment. What gives? The man chuckled sheepishly and scratched a wart on the side of his nose. I need your help, Pa, and I figured being polite was a good way to go at it. The toad's eyebrows rose in surprise. I suppose so, Fukasaku said. It's not often you admit to a shortcoming. Maybe you're starting to be deserving of your self-given title. Jiraiya grimaced and sighed. Well, about that, we will talk, but I need to start at the beginning. Will you hear me out? The man asked, almost pleading at the end. The toad smiled. Of course, Jiraiya. I would be remiss to not offer help to our senior summoner. Speak. Jiraiya breathed out in relief before he let himself fall on his bottom, crossing his legs in front of him before he inhaled deeply. It's about Naruto. And for the better part of the night, the toad sage talked with his strange interlocutor who stood silent and attentive. His speech slowed by hesitation and shame at first. The man laid down his doubts. He wasn't sure he deserved to be Naruto's master when he had chosen to honor one duty as an excuse to shy away from another, discharging himself from it on his own sensei, breaking a promise. It was then the dam broke, regrets and sorrow flowing along with the words. This choice resulted in the boy being feared and ostracized by the village he had grown up in. The blonde had been alone for the entirety of his 13 years of life, without any real support despite the crushing burden he was afflicted with. When he finally found a brother, it was only to be betrayed by him. Jiraiya explained how he was afraid Naruto would chase after the traitor like the toad sage himself had done when his own brother had fallen to treachery. He explained that he did not know what to do, did not know how to explain, did not know how to steer Naruto away from a path that could be nothing but self-destructive. Through everything, the aged toad listened, never interrupting his summoner save for a few questions. When Jiraiya eventually finished, Fukasaku looked at the man and smiled gently. You had a lot on your mind but even more on your heart, Jiraiya boy. How do you feel now? Jiraiya was a giant of a man, one who had seen war, known love and loss, hope and despair. Yet now, he felt like a child under the eyes of the small toad. I don't know, mumbled the man as he sagged from exhaustion. Really, now? Jiraiya answered nothing, refusing to meet the toad's gaze, his eyes looking at emptiness. Fukasaku waited patiently until, eventually, the man looked up. I feel terrible. One oft feels like that when admitting to their perceived faults. A sigh escaped Jiraiya's lips, heavy with remorse. So you do think I failed? No, countered the toad. But you definitely do. And admitting that is the first step to making things better. I do believe you had a moral obligation toward your previous pupil when you accepted to take care of his son were anything to happen to him. The fact you did not do so speaks poorly of you. Another sigh forced its way out of Jiraiya's chest. I also find it admirable that you decided to recognize it and do something about it. Just know that I'm not the one who can absolve you of the fault you committed. Only Naruto can. I know, whispered Jiraiya. Now regarding Naruto himself, I would trust the lad to be intelligent enough to understand things if you explain it to him. The man snorted. He is terribly bull-headed. That does not mean he cannot think. If you order him to not go against this Sasuke Uchiha, he definitely will, if only to spite authority. Authority never really helped him after all. You need to mentor him, not point a direction and order him to run. But how do I do that? The toad raised one brow. You speak to him, of course. You cannot go in while blind. If you want to craft the better argument, you need to know how the kid works and what to strike down. So do what you do best, gather information. Isn't that manipulative? Is trying to convince someone to your view manipulative? Manipulation is defined by its deceptive, underhanded aspect. Do you plan on being so? No. Of course not. Then don't be. Be honest, tell the boy what he needs to know. What Naruto needs to know, not what you think he needs to know, let me be clear on that. At some point, a hidden truth becomes a lie and a lie are always poisonous. Actually, if what you told me about young Naruto is true, the poison is already in effect. What do you mean, Pa? He used the Rasengan in his fight against the Uchiha, correct? Yes. Naruto was found in the Valley of the End with a wound characteristic of a Chidori on the right side of his chest, correct? Yes. From what he told you of their fight, what does that truly tell you? Jiraiya stayed silent for a few seconds before he whispered in horror. Naruto was ready to die, wasn't he? It would seem the boy does not value himself indeed. His mission was to bring back the Uchiha, and when the time came to strike, he preferred to allow his target to nearly kill him and escape. Fukasaku said with a sad nod of his head. That is why he needs a mentor, Jiraiya. Naruto-kun needs to understand that he matters, despite what your village, your Hokage, and yourself did to him. The toad sage winced but nodded all the same. Would you help me, Pa? The man asked after a few seconds of pained silence. Of course. Naruto is one of our own after all. Summon me again tomorrow and I shall help however I can. Just understand this, Jiraiya. Naruto needs to come to the right conclusions by himself, and for that, he'll need to discover who he is first. I cannot guarantee this Naruto will please everyone. Not even you. The two fell silent for a minute as the Toad Sage processed what had just been told to him before he nodded resolutely. Not a problem. Good. I'm not helping to train a fool. Have a good night. Jiraiya shifted to sit in Caesar before he kowtowed. Thank you, Fukasaku-sama. You're welcome, Jiraiya boy, answered the toad one final time before he disappeared in a puff of smoke. In the now silent clearing, the Toad Sage stayed in his kowtow for a full minute before he shifted and let himself fall on his back. Above him, countless stars were shining. The man chuckled. I might do good by that promise yet, Minato. I simply hope Kushina doesn't murder me a second time once I join you all up there. With a groan, Jiraiya stood and walked back to his camp, his replica dispelling in smoke once he reached the fire pit. He had work to do and much to think about if he wanted to do it right. When the sun finally rose high enough to pierce the canopy, Jiraiya was still thinking. An all-nighter wasn't a problem for him. He had lived through more than his share during his life, and he busied himself to make breakfast, allowing Naruto some respite. The Toad Sage fished in a small leather backpack a pair of rolled parchments covered with mystic scribbles. One hand sign later and the man had a pan, a kettle, and a pot ready for use. With a flex of his chakra, Jiraiya materialized water in the kettle and pot, put both over the fire to boil, and returned to his pack where he found rice and some meat. Satisfied with his preparations, the man turned, looked up at the sun, thoughts for a moment and nodded. Should be okay by now. The man's chakra swelled again much like last night in the clearing and Jiraiya repeated the summoning ritual. In a puff of smoke, the old toad, Fukasaku, appeared. Hello, Jiraiya. Pa, I hope it's not too early. I told Ma I'd be out today, no worry. Thanks. The toad turned around, his gaze coming to rest on the form of Naruto. So this is the tadpole, huh? You know he is awake, right? Of course. I am a good shinobi, Pa. The toad chuckled. Of course, of course. Say, Naruto boy, why don't you join your master and me for breakfast? The boy stilled unnaturally for a second before he stirred, stretching and yawning in an exaggerated way. Hello pervy sage, Toad Gramps. Toad Gramps, huh? And pervy sage. It suits both of us, Jiraiya. The man smiled. It does. Come Naruto, breakfast will soon be ready. The man and the boy ate in silence, the toad content with observing them. Once all was said, done, washed, and packed again, a heavy silence settled around the camp. Naruto, began Jiraiya, we need to talk. About what? The blonde asked, no trace of enthusiasm to be found in his voice. About you in general, my boy, interceded the elder toad. I'm Fukasaku, one of the elders of the toads of Mount Myoboku. Jiraiya asked me for my help in training you. A flash of something sparkled in the blue eyes of the boy before it went away, as fast as it had appeared. Naruto's head rose and he gazed at the man and the toad. What are you going to teach me? Why do you think you're on the road, Naruto? Fukasaku asked in response. Huh? Why is Jiraiya taking you on a trip? Naruto cocked his head sideways before he shrugged. Training? I don't know, don't you? The toad questioned, a smile on his lips. Well, this journey is all about you and your training indeed, but what kind of training do you suppose you'll receive? Well, enough training to save Sasuke, answered the blonde a bit more animatedly. And to become Hokage, he added with a shout as an afterthought. I see. Well, every journey needs to begin somewhere and to really start, we need to talk, as we said. Get yourself comfortable because we will address as many subjects as we need, some you won't want to touch. Naruto sat upright and sent a glare the toad's way. Bring it, Fukasaku chuckled. Good, good, not afraid as I can see. Facing yourself can be hurtful and it is good to see you so robust. Facing myself? Indeed. Do you know the saying that goes, if you know yourself, if you know nature, and if you know your enemy, you'll be victorious? The blonde shrugged. It might have been something Iruka-sensei had said once in class during the academy. Naruto could not be bothered to listen to that kind of thing. He needed jutsu, not pretty words. I can feel you scoff from here. I know you lack discipline, Naruto, and I won't fault you for it, but it does not mean I will tolerate it. Fukasaku said good-naturedly. Are you maybe more receptive to things when you walk? No, no, I'm listening, answered Naruto dismissively. Only for something fast, heavy, and strong to impact him on his chest, sending him flying and crashing against a tree. I've been imparting knowledge for hundreds of years, came the deceptively calm voice of Fukasaku. All the toads I taught were different and each required a different approach. That is fine by me. However, when I teach, I expect to be listened to. Now, Naruto, would you be more comfortable walking or do I slap you again? The blonde looked around him, searching for the S-ranked taijutsu master that had just delivered the hit when the words of the toad registered. Whoa, you're super strong, Toad Gramps. The blonde exclaimed, only for Fukasaku to appear by his side and hit him lightly on the shoulder with a stick. Politeness is one aspect of a man's discipline. I understand why it wasn't taught to you, my boy. I will not, however, tolerate it and so you'll need to learn it. I'm not Toad Gramps, I'm Fukasaku. Do I call you Fox Boy? Naruto grimaced at that before he pouted. It's true though, you're a Toad and a Gramps. I may call you Fox Boy then. The blonde grimaced again. I'm sorry, Fukasaku. Better. Now, about my question. Walking or seated? I don't know. Let's take a walk, shall we? The toad decided suddenly, jumping on the blonde boy's shoulder. Let's go, Jiraiya. The man nodded and smothered the campfire before following after the incongruous duo. For a few minutes, the three walked in silence. So, Naruto, have you heard the saying from earlier? No, Fukasaku. How do you think it relates to you? The blonde shrugged. I don't know. You did not even try to think, Naruto. Do not be afraid to answer wrong. You will not be mocked here, not by me, not by Jiraiya, not by the trees, not by the road. So think, Naruto, and try to come up with an answer. The toad chided, the tone of his voice even cowed. The blonde fell silent and thought about the little toad's question, repeating the saying in his mind countless times. Is it your way of teaching? Asked Naruto after a while. When the toad did not answer, the boy continued heatedly. But I need jutsu, not some crap. He was interrupted by a tap on his shoulder. Do not scream, I'm right here and I hear you. You are seeing a tree for the forest. Jutsu are only a part of knowing yourself. A very little part. So you're going to teach me a jutsu? The blonde asked, confused. Why would I when you wouldn't know what to do with it? The boy blushed in anger. I know how to use jutsu. He was silenced by another tap on his shoulder, harder this time. The next time you scream, I'll send you back to Konoha with a punch. And no, you do not know how to use jutsu. Tell me all the jutsu you know. Henge, Kawarimi, Kage Bunshin, and Rasengan, answered Naruto with a pout. Did you know that Kage Bunshins share their experiences with the original once they are dispelled? What, precisely? Jiraiya informed me of your use of Kage Bunshin. The only reason you can is because of the large reserve of chakra given to you by the Kyuubi within you. You do not remotely use the jutsu to its fullest potential. You do not know how to use it. I didn't even know about it. No one told me, and your teachers up until now are mainly at fault for that. But did you try asking questions? Did you try experimenting on your own? No, because you lack discipline. Well, it's not like anyone would have answered my questions anyway, grumbled the blonde. So you gave up before even trying? I thought it was precisely not your style. Naruto sputtered and reddened. Understand this, my boy. You're not at fault for the neglect of your teachers and your caretakers. It does not change the fact that you have shortcomings as a result. You can blame it on them or face forward and work with Jiraiya and me to correct them. The blonde's face morphed into a pout and he put both his hands in his pockets, forming and relaxing his fists for a full minute. Eventually, the boy looked shyly at the toad on his shoulder. Can you please teach me, Fukasaku-sensei? The toad smiled. I can. You see, your journey with Jiraiya is a metaphor. Life is a journey through which every one of us goes through and we change in the process. If you listen to us, we can guide you through those changes. Naruto eyed the toad for a moment. But I don't want to change, the boy protested, strangely weirded out at the prospect. Really? Can you refuse to grow up, Naruto? What? No, I don't want to stay short. But can you stay a kid forever? Naruto hummed in contemplation. No, if I do I won't be Hokage. He answered eventually. Change itself isn't a bad or a good thing, it just is and it is inevitable. It's up to you to make the best of it. The boy nodded thoughtfully. I'm not sure I get it but you'll teach me, right? Fukasaku smiled. Indeed. Cool. So what do we begin with? This knowing myself thing? Precisely, but before we go further, Naruto, I need you to know that knowing oneself is dangerous because it causes people to lie to themselves when the truth is too ugly for them. And that often causes more pain in turn. Naruto scrunched his face and thought. Is that what facing myself mean? You said something like that. Yes. Hence, I will not allow you to lie to yourself as long as you are under my watch. Is that understood? The boy fell silent, contemplating the toad's words as hard as he could. He absent-mindedly noted that walking did seem to help. Yes, he answered, having reached his decision. Let's begin then. Or rather, let's continue. As I've shown you, you knew little about Kage Bunshin. Now tell me, what do you know about the Rasengan? Naruto racked his brain, looking for an answer that could satisfy the toad before he realized he did not even know what the toad was after. The boy settled for describing the jutsu as Jiraiya had taught him. The toad simply nodded. Tell me, Naruto, is a Rasengan less powerful than a Chidori? The blonde winced and his left hand subconsciously clutched his right clavicle. Yes, Naruto answered, only to receive a light tap on his shoulder. What? He asked dejectedly. It's true. Another tap interrupted him. Feeling the heat of anger rise and well with his chest, Naruto huffed through his tightened jaw. It's not my fault Sasuke's attack beat. Another tap stopped him in his tracks and the boy exploded. What do you want me to say? I couldn't. A strike to the stomach silenced the boy by folding him in two. I said I would not tolerate you screaming in my ears. I also said I would keep you from lying to yourself. Is a Rasengan less powerful than a Chidori? Fukasaku asked, his tone firm and unwavering, his voice barely above a whisper yet clear and powerful. Naruto clenched his hands into fists and scrunched his eyes close. After a minute, the boy forced a no through his clammed jaw. Why did you fail to bring the Uchiha back? Fukasaku asked again. I couldn't kill him. Naruto cried, his eyes widening in despair. A tap on his shoulder interrupted him. I couldn't. The boy pleaded, first to the elder toad, then to his master, who had been silent until now. Jiraiya shook his head. Couldn't or wouldn't? The man asked the boy without heat nor reproach. Your mission was to bring him back, Naruto, dead or alive. You could have stopped him but you chose not to if it meant killing him. Your Hokage gave you an order, not a choice. By disobeying it, you walked the first step toward becoming a missing nin. After all, they are nothing more than ninjas who betrayed their orders. Naruto was too flabbergasted to answer anything to that. You could have and should have killed him, Naruto, those were your orders. You chose not to, giving Orochimaru a dangerous body to possess, potentially giving to a madman the ability to become even more dangerous. Not to Konohagakure but to the entire world. But I couldn't kill my teammate. Naruto cried desperately, tears streaming down his face. Jiraiya sighed and Fukasaku neared the blonde boy, resting one palmed hand on his knee. I know how much it hurts Naruto to have a teammate turning rogue. But that's exactly the point. By turning rogue, he ceased to be your teammate. He endangered the lives of many ninjas of Konoha, yours included. His life is not more important than the 5 who nearly died going after him. His life is not more important than yours, Naruto. But he is my friend. The blonde protested heatedly, swallowing his tears. He is my friend, I had to save him. Jiraiya looked at the boy then at the toad with a plea in his eyes. That was what he did not know how to solve. That was what he did not know how to talk about. Tell me, Naruto, said Fukasaku. Why was Sasuke your friend? The blonde fell silent, apparently collecting himself. Because he knows the pain. He is alone and he knows what it means. The boy answered in a whisper and with a sniffle. But has he ever acted as a friend? Has he ever been supportive? Has he ever helped you? Sharing one's pain makes it easier to sympathize with them but it does not make them a friend. So, Naruto, was the Uchiha your friend? He acknowledged me, did he? Or was he simply jealous? Did he respect you or was he trying to put you down? Did he even hesitate like you did when he hurt you? Tell me, was he your friend, Naruto? I was. I am his. But was he yours? Yes, answered Naruto lifelessly. Nothing answered him but silence. He waited for the tap on his shoulder but it did not come. He waited and the lie became uglier and uglier under the light of truth. No, he corrected eventually in a whisper. No, he repeated, sadly and bitterly this time. He wasn't a friend. I don't have friends anyway. He continued, his throat so tight it was hurting. Who'd be friend with the dead last? Jiraiya squeezed the boy's shoulder. Do not sell yourself short, Naruto. Shikamaru Nara, Akamichi Choji, Konohamaru Sarutobi are all people who respect you. Even this Neji kid, and Rock Lee, the taijutsu nutcase, respect you. That's a proper foundation for friendship. The man offered reassuringly. Naruto just buried his face in the larger man's red haori and cried his heart out. Jiraiya felt guilt well inside him, as well as anger. If Naruto had been properly raised, if he had known what friendship was like, if he, Jiraiya, had been there, if his sensei had done his job as the Hokage. It felt petty to assign blame, but the man could not help it. He could not admit all of it was his own fault. He was not even sure it was in the first place. I think we have worked on the self enough for today, said Fukasaku gently, hoping on Jiraiya's shoulder and looking at the man knowingly. Jiraiya eyed Naruto as he ate his breakfast. The kid looked exhausted. His blue eyes were shadowed by the deep mark characteristic of lack of sleep, and his face was marred by a somber look. The Toad Sage had obviously heard his apprentice toss and turn for the entire night, apparently incapable of finding his place of rest. He had a rough idea of what was going on in the boy's mind, and he knew it was not pleasant. Jiraiya ruminated on Fukasaku's words as he chewed on whatever he had put together this morning. Facing oneself was indeed not easy and painful. It had to be doubly so for Naruto. The disheveled blonde combed a hair through his hair and with a sigh of mixed disgust and annoyance, dropped his food on the ground before getting up and searching through his backpack. With a grunt, the boy fished a cup of instant ramen from the depths of the haversack. The Toad Sage chuckled. He looked so much like his mother right now, it was not even funny. Jiraiya did not know why he was even laughing. A pang of hurt from a wound that had never healed made him shudder, and the man had to blink. The thought led him to more unpleasant considerations. He had pulled a second all-nighter himself, agonizing yet again about what he was going to tell the boy. Naruto was a young boy becoming an adult. A ninja, what was more, Jiraiya could not keep coddling him. Not that the boy had ever been coddled, the Toad Sage muttered to himself. His sensei had kept the boy's burden a secret from Naruto until a traitor had taken advantage of it, nearly killing his godson in the act. That was not coddling, that was not protecting. That was putting Naruto in danger, and what for? The guilt that weighed on his heart in an effort to crush it was Jiraiya's answer. Why had his sensei not revealed the secret earlier, taken the bull by its horns when the little he had done had so obviously failed? Jiraiya had contemplated the question for the entire night, and his conclusions had been highly unpleasant. He refused to believe his sensei could be so hypocritical, but after all, the village comes first, had been the code the man had lived by. If the price to pay was one little boy. Jiraiya huffed and shook his head. It was pointless to contemplate the deeds of dead men. The important was the now, the important was the people who were still alive. A slurping sound broke the Toad Sage from his musing, and he gazed as his godson inhaled noodles with a look of pure concentration on his face. All traces of his previously dark disposition completely gone and replaced by simple contentment. Jiraiya decided to take advantage of the boy's apparently better disposition. What do you want to do today, Naruto? Huh? The boy sent the Toad Sage a confused look. For training. What do you want to train in? Naruto slowly slurped the noodles that were hanging from his lips and chewed slowly before swallowed it down. Don't you, tell me what to do, pervy sage? Jiraiya shook his head. No. Do you know why? The boy reflexively shrugged his shoulders to show his ignorance. The Toad Sage frowned minutely. Naruto? Yeah, what is it? The blonde boy answered in between two mouthfuls of ramen. Why do you do that? Jiraiya asked, keeping his voice neutral and doing his best to radiate patience. Taking a solid stick, he stirred the ashes and awoke the fire. Do what? I ask you a question, yet rather than to try and answer it, you immediately say that you don't know. Why? The Toad Sage clarified, his voice still carefully blank, looking at the blonde boy intently from the corner of his eyes. Naruto's face visibly darkened again, and he stopped his meal. Jiraiya was strangely grateful. The sound of noodles being slurped up was grating. "'Cause I don't know the answer, obviously." The boy muttered aloud with a sulky expression. "You do not attempt to look for it," corrected Jiraiya with all the gentleness he could summon, looking from the fire to the boy. "I would like to know why? I'm the dead last, remember? I'm too stupid to come up with answers, that's Sakura's job." The toad sage frowned and reclined on his seat, an upturned tree stump. I was the dead last too, you know? Surprise widened Naruto's blue eyes and his mouth arched in a disbelieving, oh, his sour mood momentarily forgotten. Jiraiya chuckled. Yep, dead last. The class clown. I'm an orphan like you, so anything was good to get noticed. Naruto kept silent, drinking the words of his teacher like they were the sweetest things he had ever drank. A small, comforting warmth blossomed in his chest. His teacher knew. It was war though, so I was let out of the academy early with Tsunade and Orochimaru. Jiraiya continued, a wistful expression painted on his face. And Hiruzen Sarutobi became our leader. The blonde boy simply stayed silent, but the toad sage could see that Naruto was hanging at his every word. Our sensei was also the Hokage though, so we had to rely on ourselves a lot. Orochimaru, he is a genius you know. Everything came easily to him. Tsunade isn't a half-wit either and she had her family to support her. Me on the other hand, I had no one and I had spent too much time clowning around to have the necessary discipline and method to become a good ninja. Silence fell on the clearing as Jiraiya saw the ghosts of a distant past dance in front of his eyes, reflected in the indifferent joy of the crackling fire. Naruto swallowed thickly, waiting for the rest. I was like you. I didn't even try to find the answer to the questions I was asked. Because if I didn't, then someone would come take care of me and explain to me. They would pay attention to me. With Sensei, however, it wasn't possible. Between his duty as the Hokage and his two other students, he couldn't give me his full time. A piece of wood cracked and splintered in its middle. I was resentful at first. Orochimaru didn't need Sensei, he was a genius anyway, and Tsunade had the support of her family. Sensei should have been here for me. It was only fair. That's what I thought at least. What then? Naruto prodded, curiosity winning over modesty. It took 2 years. We were 8 and the war dwindled in its intensity even if it did not stop, and Sensei took me for a month. He gave me the 2 most important lessons of my life. Jiraiya explained with a melancholic smile. Naruto waited, vibrating with excitement at the thought of being imparted with the wisdom of a cage. He was disappointed, however, when Jiraiya simply looked at him and pinned him with a stare. So, Naruto, why do you do it? The toad sage asked, repeating his original question. The blonde boy sputtered and recoiled before he averted his eyes, his face marred with a scowl. I told you, I'm stupid anyways. Jiraiya sighed. I know it is painful for you Naruto, but it's not a weakness to admit to your feelings. It is also part of your training, remember? The scowls deepened and the blonde gritted his teeth, his hands clenching nervously into fists. You can take your time to think about it. Just know that I won't teach you anything until you answer. As a man, you'll need to answer the questions on your own. Jiraiya rose from his seated position on the ground and dusted himself before he fished for a little notebook and pencil in his own haversack. Flipping through the pages, he mumbled some incomprehensible things and giggled when he found what he was looking for. I'll be by the river writing if you want to talk, he offered, only for Naruto to twist and turn his back on him. Deciding it wise to allow the boy time and space for reflection and maybe vent what he was feeling, the man walked away from the clearing. Naruto waited for a full minute after Jiraiya was gone and until he could not sense the man before he jumped on his feet and crossed his fingers. Smoke erupted from nowhere and a dozen replicas of the blonde appeared when it dissipated. What does he know, huh? What does he know? The original boy exclaimed suddenly. He isn't like me. He screamed himself hoarse before turning a glare to one of his clones. With a scream of rage, he lunged at himself and punched, hard. The replica exploded in smoke at the hit and the others bellowed a war cry before piling up on Naruto in a brutal melee. Hidden in a tree, Jiraiya and Fukasaku were looking at the violent brawl with a critical eye. If I wasn't against doing barstool psychology, I would say this is an accurate metaphor of what the boy is going through, Jiraiya said without a hint of humor in his voice. The elderly toad chuckled nonetheless. Really, now? And what is he going through? He is fighting himself. Fukasaku cocked one bushy white eyebrow. Is he? Jiraiya tore his gaze from the sight of his apprentice pitted against himself and eyed the toad. You're saying he isn't? He asked incredulously, gesturing toward the scene. I'm saying I don't do barstool psychology. The toad deadpanned. That got a chuckle from the toad sage. You got me here. There is no doubt Naruto boy is conflicted, but that is expected. However, do not confuse your experiences with his. You certainly did not live his life. Jiraiya nodded. Will you be here tomorrow? Of course. Now if you'll excuse me, Bunta asked me to help him with young Kishi. It seems younglings take reluctantly to philosophy. The toad explained with a mirthful little grin. Jiraiya groaned as the toad disappeared in a burst of smoke, returning to the sacred lands of Mount Myoboku. The toad sage darted from his roost in the tree and walked toward the river, already sketching lewd things in his little notebook. When the following day came, Jiraiya saw Naruto was even more exhausted than the day before. The dark marks over his eyes were deep and the boy was only up because his body had reflexively started awake. He was visibly nodding off. The toad sage chewed on his breakfast before he summoned Fukasaku once again. The toad had a spring in his step when he sauntered toward the camp. The philosophy lesson was successful? Jiraiya asked with a small grin and a cocked eyebrow. Very. Young Kishi shows promises when he is properly motivated. The toad sage chuckled. You hid his sweets, didn't you? Precisely, answered the elder toad, popping a small round something in his mouth. Exquisite. How are you today, Naruto boy? The toad asked, having reached the campfire in front of which Naruto was fighting to stay awake. The blonde mumbled something that ended with, Fukasaku-sensei, and blinked fast to stay awake. The toad hummed, why don't you go back to sleep, my boy? We won't achieve anything with you like that. The blonde growled something in a yawn. Can't. Must train. With what energy? No, Naruto. Sleep and you can train once you are rested. Naruto rose from his seat abruptly, glaring at the elder toad. I'm fine, he protested venomously, crossing his arms in front of his chest. You're obviously not. You can barely stay on your feet and the lack of sleep is making you aggressive. You won't learn anything like this, only exhaust yourself more. Fukasaku rebuked before turning away and nodding to Jiraiya. Wait, the call stopped the elder toad in his tracks and made him turn. Naruto was looking at him pleadingly, his arms uselessly hanging by his side, tears of fatigue glistening in his eyes. Please, I can't sleep. I close my eyes and I see him. He stabs me again and again and again. The boy's voice broke, strained by the exhaustion into a dying murmur. His head was throbbing, his throat was painfully tight, constricted by an urge to cry his complete weariness. The dam broke when Jiraiya enlaced the boy with his strong arms and pressed him against his chest. There, it's okay to cry, Naruto. It's okay, soothed the man gently, rubbing the blonde's boy in circles. When Naruto awoke, the heavenly arch was sprinkled with countless stars, all shining brightly. He felt warm and relaxed, rested. He turned on his side and stared into the dancing flames of the little fire camp. His nose tingled and twitched when the rich smell of food caressed his nostrils. How do you feel? Naruto started slightly at the sound of Jiraiya's voice. It had been so peaceful, he had not even felt the man seated beside him. The blonde stretched. Better, he admitted. Pervy sage, about earlier. When I first killed a man, interrupted Jiraiya, I had nightmares for a week. Naruto fell silent and accepted the piece of information for what it meant. It's okay. The boy swallowed thickly and sat himself up next to his teacher. Silence fell between the two, colored only by the sounds of the forest. Hear the melodious song of an owl, there the rustling of a bush, and sometimes a shrill cry. What are those? Naruto questioned. Those what? Jiraiya asked in return, playing with the fire. Those weird whistling sounds? Oh, bats. They hunt with sound, or so Fukasaku says. The blonde's eyes widened in wonder. Really? Yup. You can ask him more tomorrow if you want. Naruto fell silent for a few seconds. He knows a lot, doesn't he? Fukasaku? More than you can hope to learn in your entire life. He is old, you know, one of the oldest toads of Mount Myoboku. He is really Toad Gramps, then, Naruto said petulantly, a small smile curving his lips nonetheless. The gears in the brain of the boy took another second to work the meaning of his teacher's words. Wait, he isn't the oldest? He exclaimed suddenly. Gamamaru, the farseer, is. He is also completely senile. Senile? Jiraiya pointed at his temple with his index finger and moved it in circles. He is not all there in the head. So he is like, crazy old but for real? The toad sage chuckled. Yup, you can say that. He is always smoking his pipe, if he doesn't, he slobbers everywhere. Yuck, Naruto grimaced. The thought of a giant toad covering everything in viscous saliva was not appealing. Don't tell anyone I said that, the man said seriously. Naruto grinned. I dunno. Maybe if you stop peeping on women, I'll consider it. Jiraiya jumped on his feet, an exaggerated expression of hurt on his face, and pointed an accusing finger at the boy. You'd blackmail your teacher? You have really no respect for your elders. Naruto jumped up himself. Not when they are pervy. It's not perving, it's art. It's totally not. Is too, the sage retorted childishly. Is not, the boy accused in the same way. The two glared at each other for a minute, fire and lightning erupting from their eyes. Suddenly, Jiraiya chuckled and it rapidly devolved in a full belly laugh. The mirth was contagious as soon enough, Naruto started laughing too. The toad sage plopped back down on the stump that he was using as a seat and wiped a tear before staring at the fire. The blonde's laughing fit calmed eventually, and as he slowly collected himself, he looked at his teacher. Naruto startled at the long face Jiraiya was making. The man was unseeing, his gaze darkened and lost in recollections of memories reflected by the fire, images of a past only he could see. Pervy sage? The man took a long shuddering breath. We used to have the same argument with your mother. The world stopped and slapped Naruto in the face. Air was caught in his throat, refusing to permeate his lungs. His heart was drumming against his ears. His knees were suddenly made of wool and the blonde had to sit down. What? It came out as a whisper, so low not even he heard it. Her name was Kushina Uzumaki, and she was one fiery woman, explained Jiraiya. And suddenly, the toad sage was retelling to the son the many feats and exploits of the mother. The moon rose, went down, the sky turned and the stars danced to the infinite tune of time, and it was morning when Jiraiya stopped speaking. Naruto had the feeling his head was ready to explode. His ears were buzzing, his throat was dry and hurting, his eyes blind and wet, but worst of all, his heart was trying to tear itself in several pieces. He had a hand clenched over his chest, feeling out his flesh desperately for the hole that had been drilled through it, trying to keep the wound closed, but nothing worked. He had a mother. Everyone had a mother, that was so obvious. Naruto, however, was that boy. The perfect thing to saddle with a burden that would have broken anyone else. He did not have a mother, he was not supposed to. Who would have carried that boy within their belly? Who could have conceived that boy? Who would have even wanted that boy? He was no one, spawned from the fire fanned by the Kyuubi's flaming tails. He howled. Tears were burning his cheeks and a sob racked his body so hard he had to curve in a ball to contain the hurt. He had a mother. He had dreamed of one, beautiful and gentle and strong and caring, and turning her back on him, screaming that he was not her boy, her face morphing into a nightmarish vision only his mind could conjure. He had searched the Uzumaki name through countless scrolls only to find nothing. He was no one, spawned from the pyre lit by the Kyuubi's fiery breath. Strong hands ensnared his shoulders and pulled him against something steady. He cried and trashed and screamed until the bloated well of sorrow was exhausted. He had been denied at every turn, never answered in his quest for her. Fleeting ghost, unknown fairy, she had escaped him again and again until he had grown tired. Until he had been convinced that he was nothing but that boy. Until he had accepted that he was no one, spawned by the smoldering remains of the Kyuubi's attack. He had a mother. Naruto fell asleep, his face marred with tears and his throat sore but with a smile on his lips. Jiraiya considered himself a man difficult and slow to anger, and as a matter of fact, he was rarely ever mad. Out of his two teammates, he was definitely the calmest. Today, however, his blood was boiling with both fury and remorse at the sight of his godson tucked against him under a cover and gripping his left arm in his sleep. No 13-year-old adolescent should behave like this. For all intent and purpose, he was still a stranger to the boy, and the blonde should never have felt comfortable enough to sleep like that yet. However, Naruto was so starved of contact that he immediately sought it out at the first sign it was okay for him to do so. So at this moment, Jiraiya was mad like he had never been before. At himself, at the villagers, at his sensei, at the world, at the Yondaime Hokage, and at himself mainly because he should have been here. Had he raised the boy as he had promised, Naruto would not be this frightened child in an adolescent body. He was here now, but it certainly did not assuage his guilt. He could not help but wonder if it mattered. He was here now, so all was good, was that it? No, not when he had given his word to be there then. He had been wanted for 13 years, his cruel absence damning a boy he should have cared for like a grandson. He had other duties, the grief had been too heavy, the Hokage needed him in the field. It had not taken a lot of convincing to sway him away from the one responsibility that should have mattered above the others. Being seen with Naruto would have put the boy in danger. It had been his sensei's favorite argument. The white-haired man scoffed. He was a spymaster. If there were something he knew how to do better than most, it was to disappear. It would have been enough to spend time with the boy in a remote part of the village. Anyhow, Naruto had inherited the Uzumaki name, a clan three of the most powerful nations had genocided to the last grown adult in fear of their prowesses. Being named Naruto Uzumaki was a danger in itself, the spiral the boy wore on the back of his jacket a perfect target. Yet, no assassin had ever been sent after the boy. The other hidden villages had lost a war but not their dignity as shinobi. They had endured the defeat and decided that assassinating a babe was below them. Jiraiya was supposed to be a warrior, a shinobi too. Losing someone was not an excuse to flee, more so when there was someone left. The truth was that he had not lived up to his title. The boy and he could have been a family together, and because he missed that, Jiraiya was seeing firsthand that all was not good. Rotten leaves, the boy had had a breakdown when he had told him about his mother. No orphan should react like that when told about one of their parents. The toad sage took a deep, slow breath and shifted minutely, careful to not wake Naruto up. He was not going to allow himself to harm the boy any further. He did not swear it, the kamis knew how little he apparently thought of his words. This time, he was simply going to do it. It took another hour for Naruto to stir and wake up. The boy scrunched his face before he yawned wide enough to unhinge his jaw. He pressed the palm of his hands against his eyes to clean them from the crust of sleep. "You slept well?" The blonde startled at the question, the voice coming from strangely close to him. Only now did Naruto realize how he was nestled against Jiraiya. He felt shame coloring his cheeks and scratched the back of his head. He had had a pleasant and restful night free from the nightmares that had been haunting him. It was his first peaceful night of sleep since 3 days or so. He smiled hesitantly at his teacher and nodded, but his eyes never fully met Jiraiya's. Naruto's features shifted into a frown, his brow furrowed in quiet contemplation. It was the first time ever he had slept this well. Sasuke was not the first who had encroached and darkened his dreams. Nighttime was the moment his fears surged, free of the control he kept on them during the day. "Yeah," answered the boy eventually. The two busied themselves with breakfast. This time, Naruto ate his food with much more enthusiasm than the day before, even if still in a subdued manner that was not befitting him. Once they were done, Jiraiya took a deep breath and decided to prod his student once again. "So, Naruto, what do you want to train in today?" The boy shrugged. The toad sage was more and more certain that it was a reflex, before he looked down at his feet. Jiraiya felt a headache build behind his eyes and he massaged his temples. What had happened to the boy for him to be so incapable of formulating his own answers? It was like the blonde was afraid of using his brain to think. "Naruto?" the tall man asked as gently as he knew how to. The blonde looked up at him, and while his face was closed off and defiant much like the day before, his eyes held a pleading light. The toad sage knew this look, it was one of fragility and uncertainty. Jiraiya narrowed his eyes. There was something he was missing, something incredibly important, something that weighed on his godson like a chain. He exhaled slowly. "I do not want to force you, Naruto," said the toad sage, radiating patience, "but whatever you do not want to tell me is stifling you right now. Speaking can help, you know." Naruto swallowed thickly and nodded, his face pale and void of his usual sunny disposition. A disposition that was becoming less and less common. Jiraiya looked at the boy intently. "Should I tell you about your mom a bit more?" The boy immediately smiled at the mention of more knowledge concerning his mother and nodded happily, the downcast look a distant memory. Jiraiya narrowed his eyes further for a second. Weird. The toad sage took a deep breath and racked his brain for what tidbits he could tell the boy for now. He had to be careful not to mention Naruto's father. The blonde was too fragile to take the news right now. Jiraiya realized he did not like hiding the truth like that, but another shocking truth so quickly would scatter him like ashes in the wind. "She was hot-tempered," began the sage with a smile. "You got that from her, I swear." Stubborn to a fault, brash, always ready for a fight. Naruto beamed. Those weren't exactly qualities a ninja required, and usually, they were thrown at his face like insults, but he could not be prouder right now. He was like his mother, and that was all that mattered. Kushina was also most caring to those precious to her. I see that side of her in you, too. Not that your father did not contribute to that. The smile on Naruto's face widened. It slowly dwindled and morphed into an anxious frown. The boy fidgeted for a second before asking the question that was occupying his mind. Did she want me? He whispered fearfully. Jiraiya offered him a feeble crooked smile and looked at him with shining eyes. She was so excited. He breathed out in a shuddering voice. From the moment she learned she was with you, it was like her birthday was happening every day. Naruto had to blink desperately, doing his best to keep the tears at bay as they fought to escape. He did not want to cry. It was a happy thing to be so desired by his mother. It was the balm to one of his most painful wound. He forced a smile on his lips but sobbed in relief instead. She had your crib ready the next day, said Jiraiya in a broken voice. It was orange for Leaf's sake. An ugly-ass orange crib. The man tried to laugh but his throat was tight and hurting and it came out hoarse and sawed. Don't diss the orange, answered Naruto defiantly with a sniff, his own voice barely coming out. I'm not, responded the sage in a murmur with tears rolling down his face. I'm not. Once the two calmed down, Jiraiya kept telling the boy as much as he could remember. When the morning came to an end, Naruto had a rather clear picture of his mother in his head. She was a beautiful woman with red hair that floated around when she was angry, her sweet violent eyes turning to amethyst if there was an enemy to be slain. She had been incredibly powerful as well, and her legacy was that of a fierce warrior with many talents. It was past midday when Jiraiya rose from his seat and motioned Naruto to imitate him. We're going to go hunting, the sage informed. Hunting? We have food though, Naruto remarked, a bit puzzled but relieved his teacher was taking charge nonetheless. Yes, but hunting allows for multiple learning opportunities, explained Jiraiya. Also, fresh meat is better than dried jerky, the man added after a second's thought. Without further ado, the young boy and the man exited the clearing of the camp to enter the foliage of the Fire Country forest. It took Naruto a few minutes to notice, but he soon noticed Jiraiya was somehow moving without making a sound. The blonde would cause leaves to rustle with each step, or break a twig, or displace a bush, but his teacher was not disturbing the ambient song of the woods in the slightest. They progressed swiftly, Jiraiya bending every once in a while to touch the earth, take a whiff of the air, or mumble something. At some point, Naruto simply could not fight his curiosity anymore. How are you doing that, pervy sage? He whispered loudly. Jiraiya winced and stopped. One could count on Kushina's son to be deafening even when murmuring. The sage turned, mildly annoyed at the surname still, and cocked an eyebrow. How'd I do what? He asked, leashing his powerful voice to a small stream. Naruto flailed. Like, you're totally silent. Jiraiya hummed pensively. He really had to test what were the problem's boundaries. What do you think? He asked. Naruto immediately clammed up and looked away. I don't know, the blonde shrugged. The sage sighed minutely, too low to be heard. The boy refused to hazard even a simple guess. He asked with enthusiasm, could answer a yes or no question, followed with attention, but for some reason, using his brain to formulate an answer to something that required him to think was impossible. The boy was afraid of doing so. What in the rotten leaves was happening to his godson? Shaking his head, Jiraiya decided to let it go once again. He would need to discuss it with Fukasaku. A good ninja was one that followed order, but an excellent shinobi was one who could think on their own 2 feet. Naruto could not stay this way. To survive the people coming for him, the blonde had to scale the hurdle of becoming an S-rank menace. Jiraiya could not teach the boy much as long as he was stuck in this state. The sage suddenly pointed at the ground and crouched. See that here? The man asked in a low tone. Those are the prints of a deer. Naruto breathed out in relief and crouched next to his sensei. Really? He answered in his own brand of whispering. Jiraiya smiled sideways. Yup, but we ain't going to go anywhere near it if you don't tone it down a little. The blonde blushed and scratched the back of his head. Sorry, he muttered. No problem, but remember, a good shinobi is a silent shinobi. The afternoon was spent trailing in the forest, Jiraiya teaching his lone student the ropes of tracking, the way to identify different animals, the name of various trees, the properties of a multitude of mushrooms, flowers, and berries. Naruto simply marveled at the well of knowledge his teacher appeared to possess and decided to do his best to gratefully absorb as much of it as he could. He doubted his memory would retain the majority of what he was being told, but he could admit it was surprisingly interesting. It was no flashy jutsu or awesome special move, but even he was not dumb enough to deny that knowing what plant was poisonous, what flower could heal, and what root could be eaten was useful. It was all a matter of if he would ever be capable enough to apply this knowledge. Several hours later, they stopped their excursion. The deer escaped them, but the toad sage successfully caught 2 rabbits. Making their return to camp, the man explained why and how it was necessary to empty the animals of their blood and bowels, how to skin them, what to use to cook the meat, and how to preserve it. The teacher and pupil were back around their campfire, and Jiraiya decided now was as good a time as ever to go from theory to application. After all, it was by doing one perfected a craft. He was convinced of it, and it seemed to be especially true for Naruto anyways. Under the focused gaze of his student, the toad sage killed the rabbit by twisting its neck and prepared the animal. After a few stretched seconds of hesitation, the boy imitated the motions as best as he could, not completely tearing the hide apart. Pretending to be a hunter selling raw hides and meat is a useful cover for a shinobi, said Jiraiya suddenly. If you ever have to travel without being spotted, you'll need an alibi, a role to play. The hunter is a useful one. It allows you to disappear in the wood without people asking questions about it, and it comes with a lot of useful knowledge. Naruto grunted absent-mindedly, observing the blood of the rabbit on his hands. It was already lukewarm, smelled of iron, and felt gross on his skin. He had already seen blood, of course, he had been wounded numerous times. However, it was the first time he had ended a life, of any kind. He kept wondering if it would feel even remotely the same to kill another man. A hand on his shoulder interrupted his musing, and he looked up at the worried face of his teacher. "Everything all right, Naruto?" The boy nodded and offered a lopsided smile to the white-haired man who frowned. "You know you can. It's the first time I kill," blurted out the blonde. Jiraiya internally winced. "Why didn't you tell me anything?" he asked in a neutral tone. The blonde caught himself before he could scratch the back of his head and mumbled something under his breath. The toad sage waited patiently for the boy to repeat himself. I wanted to know if I could do it," Naruto said eventually. Jiraiya nodded. "How do you feel?" The blonde shook his head. I dunno, gross." "Is it the same?" the boy asked. As Jiraiya did not answer, Naruto clarified his thought in a small voice. "Killing another man, I mean?" The sage took a deep breath and slowly exhaled the air trapped in his lungs. He hummed for a minute, evidently considering his answer with great care. "It will depend on you," said the white-haired man eventually. "Some do not see a difference, others insist there is one. Killing is killing, it is the most final action you can take toward another living being. It must never become something casual." A minute of silence settled between the two. "I don't like it," said Naruto. The toad sage gave the boy's shoulder a squeeze. "As a man, it is rather a good thing. However, remember that a good shinobi is a ruthless shinobi. You'll have to kill those your duty points you too." Naruto shuddered and darkened. "I don't like that." He could still remember this terrifying moment where he had thought Sasuke killed by Haku. This second of pure, unadulterated horror of seeing his comrade lying lifeless at his feet, then the sensation something had been ripped out of him. Killing others meant he would make people feel like that. He also remembered the anger, the boiling rage coursing through his veins, the thirst for the enemy's own blood, the urge to avenge his fallen teammate. That love could morph into hate and fuel it just like that was a truly frightening thought. "I don't like that," repeated Naruto. Jiraiya sighed. "I don't like it either." The toad sage then demonstrated how to prepare meat to preserve it before he sealed Naruto's rabbit in a scroll. Storage scrolls distort time, but there is no way to stop it truly. That's why you still have to use a generous dose of salt. The man brandished the scroll. "It will be good for a year." Naruto's mouth shifted into a small "oh" of awe and he nodded. "Can you teach me how to do that, sensei?" Considering his fridge was always out of order, it seemed like a useful skill to have. And he was on the road for now, so it was actually a skill he needed. The white-haired man smiled. "Will do." Uzumakis were very talented in seal making. The blonde's eyes widened and he beamed happily. If seal crafting was something his clan mastered, then it was another reason to learn it. He had always heard fuinjutsu was extremely complicated though. The thoughts made him frown. He would probably never reach the Uzumaki's level of mastery. Let's prepare this one for tonight, shall we? Naruto's stomach growled in anticipation and he nodded. Due to going on a hunt, they had not eaten more than a few berries and he had to admit he was famished. He observed with fascination as Jiraiya busied himself around the various pans he had disposed over the fire like he actually knew what he was doing. The blonde's initial disbelief morphed into respect when a divine smell rose and tickled his nose, making him salivate. The rabbit stew, accompanied by a few roots Jiraiya called potatoes and some wild leeks, put stars in the boy's eyes. "You know how to cook, sensei," Naruto exclaimed after the first mouthful, his face displaying his admiration for the world to see before he focused back on his plate. "This is so good," beamed the blonde happily. Jiraiya simply chuckled, the bemused smile he had on his lips masking his internal frown. Naruto was acting like he never actually had a decent meal in his life. The only thing the boy ate with nearly as much enthusiasm was ramen. Suddenly, the truth of the matter, simple and obvious and incredibly ugly, crashed on Jiraiya. Naruto never had had a decent meal in his life before apart from ramen. A dark shadow passed in the sage's eyes. Konoha definitely had to answer some questions of his and he would make sure it hurt if people did not comply. He might not have been there, he was guilty many times over and he could have supported Naruto way more despite his duty to the village. Naruto, however, had endured more neglect than he first thought and someone would answer for that. Not doing anything was one thing. Going out of one's way to make his godson's life miserable was another. Dinner was finished quickly despite Naruto eating his way through nearly the entire marmite. The blonde boy then helped wash the various pans, insisting it was only fair he did it given Jiraiya had cooked. The toad sage allowed it, giving occasional pointers here and there to the boy who did not even know how to properly wash kitchen utensils. It took a good amount of willpower to the white-haired Densetsu no Shinobi to not run back to Konoha with his sword drawn out and ready for blood. The rest of the evening was spent exchanging stories around the fire, Jiraiya once again regaling Naruto with tales about his mother, mixing it with some of his own achievement. The sun slowly settled westward, coloring the sky in hues of orange and purple as the symphony of the wilderness turned to something different, more mysterious, more threatening. "You stole the Tsuchikage hat?" Naruto exclaimed at one point, pointing a finger at his sensei and wearing a proper expression of awe on his face. Jiraiya chuckled. It was a warning. After Kyuubi, Konoha seemed fragile, an easy prey. Iwa had weathered a very nasty blow during the war and they weren't in any shape or form to launch another one. But facts are, the death of Minato could have made them bold and we could not have that, so I reminded them that Yondaime was not our only S-rank menace. The boy sat back down, laughing heartily at the thought of his teacher actually infiltrating Iwa in order to steal a hat. It sounded silly. It was also undeniable proof that Jiraiya was probably the best infiltrator in the elemental nations. "You're really sneaky, huh, pervy sage?" Jiraiya scowled in mock anger but then smiled. "I heard you aren't too bad yourself." "Huh? What do you mean?" Naruto asked, his visage sporting a puzzled expression. "Well, all your pranks," clarified Jiraiya. "I asked around and some of them were quite impressive actually." Naruto rubbed the back of his head. "They were pretty stupid," he mumbled. "No use making fun of." "I'm not," the white-haired man interrupted with a strong tone, looking at his student dead in the eyes. "I heard about you painting the Hokage monument in broad daylight in front of dozens of shinobi." "Shinobi who did not see you." "Naruto. In a village full of ninja, you could paint one of the most important landmarks in broad daylight and if you hadn't announced your presence midway, you wouldn't have been caught." "It was only a prank," protested Naruto. "It was a sabotage mission that you nearly pulled off." "What? I'd never sabotage Konoha," the blonde protested. The sage sighed and rubbed his eyelids. Arming himself with patience, the white-haired man shook his head. "It's a metaphor, an image," he corrected immediately, seeing the uncomprehending look on Naruto's face. "Imagine your pranks as a mock mission. Your goal was to paint the mountain without being caught. In a real mission, you'd have to infiltrate a village and steal something, destroy a place." The man hesitated a second. "Or kill someone." The boy grimaced but nodded nonetheless in understanding before he fell in pensive contemplation. Have you ever, Naruto asked hesitantly. Assassinated someone? Yes. Jiraiya answered grimly. The blonde felt his throat tighten uncomfortably. And Gigi, the Hokage ordered it. The sage nodded. Always. Why? Jiraiya winced at the one question that could not be answered as there were too many reasons to give to too many different stories. He did not know whether to weave a pleasant tale for the boy or delusion him now and give Naruto the harsh truth. The man took a deep breath and steeled his resolve. He was not coddling the boy. Various reasons. Once, I had to kill a man who was instigating a rebellion against the Fire Daimyo. If the man had been allowed to live, he would have pushed thousands to arms and plunged the northern border in chaos. Naruto nodded, but a grimace was marring his features. He could understand the disposing of one man to avoid a war, but was death the only solution? Such methods were reminding him of Gato's. The detestable little man had killed Kaiza precisely to prevent an insurrection and strengthen his power over Wave. Couldn't the Fire Daimyo have discussed with the man? After all, if he was ready to rebel, it meant he had grievances, right? He asked Jiraiya just that, and the man sent him a smile that was hollow of any mirth and joy. The man and his little group were in contact with Iwa, so it was a risk the Sandaime was not ready to take. But mainly, he was sentenced to death because what he was committing was treason and it was cheaper that way. Naruto deflated and wondered, would he ever have the heart to do this kind of thing if his Oba-san, his Hokage, he corrected immediately, ordered him to? He had already failed once, after all, who said he would not waver again? He had shown his inadequacy. The Toad Sage sighed and once again was gripped by hesitation as he saw the look on his godson's face. The boy was fragile right now, atrociously so. He shook his head. The whole truth would come later. Maybe you should rest, Naruto. The boy nodded but did not look at him, too lost in consideration to do so. When Naruto settled under his covers, the night was fully there, indifferent to the affairs of mortals and covering everything in her dark yet sparkling mantle. Jiraiya waited for his pupil to fall asleep before he once again created a cage buncheon. Leaving his replica to keep watch over their little camp, the Toad Sage walked away and summoned Fukasaku once again. Evening Pa. Evening Jiraiya boy. How was today? The man's smile immediately followed by a sigh was enough to answer the toad's question. Something is blocking him, Pa. He is afraid of something but I don't know what. The little elderly toad nodded and hummed, his throat producing a gravely chant as he scratched his goatee. The boy is crippled by doubts and fears, Jiraiya boy. You'll have to be a bit more accurate. I took him hunting today and he was like a sponge soaking up whatever knowledge I was willing to give him, but when I asked him what he wanted to train in, he shrugged and said he didn't know. He said he was the dead last, that he couldn't answer my question. I see. There is more, said Jiraiya grimly. He is conscious of it. He frowns and pout and he is all closed off at first glance but his eyes betray him. The toad hummed thoughtfully once again. He is on a dangerous path. It is good to confront one's demons but too many at a time and one cannot win. The elderly amphibian scratched his goatee once again. Let us meet again tomorrow and I'll see the boy. It might be an unavoidable step on his journey to discover himself. Yes, thank you Pa. See you tomorrow? The little toad shook his head. No, I think I'll stay here tonight. It has been a while since I spent some time in the Fire Country's forest. Jiraiya snorted and chuckled. Ma booted you out of the house, didn't she? Now, Jiraiya boy, it's rude to assume such things. The toad chastised. Even if you're entirely right. What did you do this time? The toad showed the man a candy that he popped in his mouth. I told to get her own. He answered with a throaty laugh and a hum of satisfaction. Delicious. Jiraiya laughed with his master. Toads were weird creatures. The elderly master and his disciple spent the night discussing things and others. What do you want to do today? Naruto hated little more than that question right now. Not a month ago, if Kakashi-sensei had asked him that, he would have screamed ninjutsu at the top of his lungs and with a spring in his steps. Except Kakashi-sensei had never offered that. In fact, the lanky man who had been his teacher and team captain in the last 6 months or so had never offered anything. Since then, everything had gone wrong. The one he thought was his best friend betrayed Konoha, endangering many comrades by doing so, and Naruto had not been able to bring him back. Sasuke had always been better, stronger, faster. Naruto had thought he was catching up, that his powers could rival that of the Uchiha. When finally they had matched their physical strength, however, Sasuke prevailed still when he struck Naruto down without hesitation. Naruto knew he had faltered. Bringing his teammate back had been his mission, his duty, his promise. Yet when the only solution had been to strike the one he considered a brother with a Rasengan, he had wavered. His resolve was weak, contrary to Sasuke's. Then Toad Gramps had torn through him. Even his strength was fake, wobbly, smoke and mirrors. He knew, of course, every fight he ever won, it was because of the Kyuubi. Haku, Kiba, Neji, Gaara. Without the tailed fox in his guts, he would have lost each one of these. His power was borrowed from another. It was no wonder, he was an idiot after all. All those people calling him that through his life could not be all wrong. Even Iruka-sensei used to call him a baka. Maybe Kakashi simply knew he was too dumb to learn. Hence, he could not understand why Jiraiya and Fukasaku kept insisting he told them what he wanted to do. They knew better, so why couldn't they show him? Why did they force him to contemplate his inadequacy when they could have pointed out what to do to him? Maybe it was because they were worried that he wouldn't listen to them. He did not pay attention to Fukasaku at first and the toad had to punch him into oblivion. He had never paid attention to any of his teachers actually, even in the academy. At the time, he thought it was fair because they weren't paying him any mind either. Yet rather than learn, he had preferred to grab their attention with pranks and tomfoolery. Because it hurt so much when he had an answer and all they did was ignore him. Because it hurt so much when they mocked him for something he did wrong. Because it hurt so much when he was denied the right to participate and was ousted from class. Iruka had been different, but by then, Naruto was a prankster through and through. Because he had been so afraid Iruka would ignore him like all the others if he were to stop. So when Jiraiya once again asked him the dreaded question, Naruto shrugged. "I don't know," he answered, glancing downward with a scowl. He did not miss the toad sage sending a helpless look at Fukasaku. The elderly toad had shared breakfast with them, eating a lot of candied treats the boy recognized. He had given those to Gamakichi. "Walk with me, Naruto." Hearing in the toad's voice that it was not a suggestion, Naruto rose to his feet and braced for when the talking Batrachian jumped on his shoulder. "Let us explore the woods, shall we?" Naruto nodded and walked straight ahead in the forest, leaving Jiraiya behind as his teacher was cleaning. The strange pair meandered under the massive trees of Fire Country in silence for a while before Fukasaku broke it. "See this butterfly? It is called a monarch. It uses its bright colors to seduce potential partners." Naruto looked at the red, orange, and black insect fluttering around. "Partners? To leave behind the next generation before they go. They live for a brief summer only, you know." "That's sad," commented the boy. "Their short life is all about leaving their kids behind?" He winced. That resonated weirdly within him. "Not really. You see, they feed on the nectar of flowers. As they go from one meal to another, they carry the seeds necessary for the next generation of plants to grow. They have an important mission." That silenced the blonde. Did everything around them have a similar task? "What about him? Do you know what this tree is?" the toad asked suddenly, pointing a palmed hand towards a great trunk. The answer escaped the blonde's lips before he could think. "It's an iron oak." Naruto glanced down. "How did you know?" Naruto felt his eyes prickle and blinked several times. "Gigi," he began, his voice hoarse. He coughed. "Gigi used to show me. When I was little and when he wasn't too busy." Naruto explained in a shuddering whisper. "You miss him?" Naruto could only nod, his lips pursed tightly. "It is fine, Naruto," Fukasaku said warmly. "To mourn those close to us when they pass is only natural. You and me, we are creatures with feelings. We cannot ignore them. I'd like it sometimes. It would be easier." Naruto breathed out. "Then would we be living truly?" "Loss is the price of love, Naruto, but would you forego the chance to love?" The boy's shoulders sagged. What was love when there was none to share it with you? Did the butterfly have the same considerations? "No one loves me," whispered Naruto, suddenly wishing he was one of the stupid insect fluttering around. "I'm just an idiot, a joke of a ninja. Incapable to do anything right. You might believe that, my boy, but it is not true. Tsunade holds great affection for you, so does Jiraiya." Naruto scoffed. "He called me an idiot, threw me off a cliff, and won't teach me. He doesn't like me, he is just, the boy lost his voice. Why was Jiraiya training him exactly? To defeat Akatsuki? Why would the man bother though? Wherever these thoughts are taking you, it is not true. Naruto felt anger suddenly welling inside him like a devouring fire. He swatted his hand over his right shoulder and whirled, forcing Fukasaku to jump away. What do you know, huh? The boy hurled. I've been called an idiot all my life. I'm too dumb to be a good ninja. The only thing about me is the stupid Kyuubi. Naruto's eyes went wide with realization, rage, then fear. That's why the old pervert is training me, he whispered in a trembling voice. He wants me to use the Kyuubi, the blonde mumbled in defeat. He thinks I'm no good too. Naruto fell on his bottom, tears rolling down his cheeks, and sighed from exhaustion. Fukasaku coughed, attracting the boy's eyes to him. The toad had an eyebrow cocked up and was watching him with skepticism. Who are you and what have you done to Naruto Uzumaki? The toad said in a no-nonsense voice. Huh? Naruto asked eloquently. What have you done to Naruto Uzumaki, the son of the red-hot habanero, the boy who never gives up? Naruto glared. A whole lot of good it did to me. The boy spat. I banged my head against obstacles so much it made me stupid. It might be true, but it kept you going forward. To where? The boy scoffed. Mediocrity, that's where. The toad elder hummed and his throat gave a grave croak as he did. Do you know how much time it took Jiraiya to learn the Rasengan? Naruto shrugged and looked away. 5 months, said Fukasaku, ignoring the boy's blatant attempt at disrespecting him. It took you 1 if I'm not mistaken. Naruto snorted. I can't do it by myself, you know? Perfection comes with practice. The fact is, you know how to perform one. It took you 5 times less than Jiraiya, one of Konoha's Densetsu no shinobi. That is a great testament to your abilities as a ninja, Naruto. The blonde glared at the toad. You said I was useless in ninjutsu. Now do not deform my words, my boy. I did say you haven't mastered your ninjutsu and that it was useless to teach you more. I did say you currently lack many things. I never said, however, that you did not have potential. I believe you can be a great ninja, Naruto. And so do I, said Jiraiya, appearing suddenly by Naruto's side, startling the boy. A great ninja without the Kyuubi. The blonde stared alternatively at his master and the elderly toad, shame slowly heating his face, relief rolling down from his wet eyes. I'm sorry, he croaked. It's just, I don't know, I feel so tired. Jiraiya gave the boy's shoulder a squeeze. A lot to take in. I'm sorry, we should have taken things slowly. Fukasaku and I both believe you can be great, but the most important thing is for you to believe so too. Naruto scowled, but there was no real heat behind it, only tiredness. What did you throw me off that cliff then? The toad sage sighed and sat beside the boy. Because I am a cretin. The blonde was too flabbergasted to be annoyed anymore and Jiraiya chuckled ruthfully. I wanted to arm you, kid. I knew about Gaara. I had no idea where I'd be needed and I knew sensei. The sage sighed again. I knew you'd be in the arena. Ready to pounce. So I needed to be sure you could access the fox chakra. Was it the worst way to go at it? Yes. I'll admit I panicked when getting you to summon Bunta wasn't enough, so I reacted like an idiot. Naruto stared at Jiraiya with wide eyes. You knew? He mumbled, disoriented. You knew? But then why? Why weren't you with Gigi? He exclaimed, his tone one of reproach which made Jiraiya wince. Because it was his duty, Naruto boy. Fukasaku interrupted. The Hokage himself ordered Jiraiya to keep the enemy forces behind the wall, and that is what Jiraiya did. When he reported the presence of Gaara de Sarutobi, it was the Hokage himself who encouraged him to get you to access the Kyuubi's power. But, why not train me? Jiraiya rubbed his eyes tiredly. It was the easy shortcut, Naruto. The one way I was sure you'd be ready in such a short time to face another unstable Jinchuriki. I know it is hard for you to hear that, Naruto, but you had almost no foundation when we first met. Your taijutsu was correct at best. The blonde scowled and the toad sage rose his hand in a peaceful motion. I'm not saying it is your fault, but it is the truth. Naruto gave his 2 teachers a humorless smile. Kakashi sensei really didn't teach much, did he? It was not a question, more a simple constatation. He taught you the values of teamwork and to cherish your comrades, pointed Fukasaku. Naruto scoffed. Nearly got me killed. Because he failed to establish boundaries, but it is still a powerful lesson, one I encourage you to follow. If with a bit more restraint. Nonetheless, he indeed neglected your personal skills and he has no excuses for that. I'm sure your Hokage will remind him of his duty if Jiraiya writes her to. The blonde shrugged. I guess it'd be cool. I mean, Sakura-chan still counts on him for her training, so Kakashi-sensei needs to get things going. See? Even now, you think of your teammate. I believe you Konohan call it the will of fire. Correct, Jiraiya? The Toad Sage nodded and Naruto fell in a second of silent contemplation. The Sandaime used to talk about it, saying it was the belief of the founding fathers of the village. Did he really have it? He closed his fist and squeezed with strength. It was a good thing, right? Beliefs are powerful things, Naruto boy, and loyalty is answered by loyalty most of the time, creating a bond that goes beyond duty. It does not stop you from exerting caution, for there are always those without honor or too lost to consider such things. Sasuke, whispered Naruto. He isn't without honor. The blonde protested. The Uchiha might have never truly been his friend, but they had at least shared a bond of comradeship. It was Sasuke who had saved him from Haku, Sasuke who had done his best against Gaara to defend Sakura, Sasuke who had spared him ultimately. Maybe not, but ultimately he answered your friendship with spite and jealousy. The seal he got from the snake didn't help, remarked Naruto. There was no heat or passion in his voice. And the genjutsu from Itachi Uchiha probably didn't help. They didn't, that's for sure, but it's irrelevant, Jiraiya said with a sigh. When he betrayed Konoha, he did not leave to confront Itachi. He left to join another known traitor to receive training. If he is reasonable enough to do that, he is reasonable enough to be held accountable for his actions. All of them. The blonde nodded. Those were the facts too. He sighed. I just wish he had gotten some help long before that. It could have gone differently. I suppose, answered Fukasaku, but it is of little use to dwell on what could have been. Naruto nodded again, resolutely this time. I can only keep going forward, eh? He said with an amused snort toward the elderly toad who smiled. Precisely. Now, Naruto boy, what do you want to do today? The blonde teenager took a deep breath and tightened his fists. When he looked at his teachers, his eyes were unsure, yet they held a flame that had not been there in the past few days. I don't know where to begin, said Naruto truthfully, looking at his now relaxed hands before glancing up at the two sages. Can you help me? Jiraiya chuckled. Good answer. Naruto beamed with one of his true smiles, and it looked like he was alive again for the first time in a few days. The next day, the boy was pushed through a ringer of physical exercises that left him panting. He paled when he was told this would become his routine every other day, but when Jiraiya punched a hole in a tree through sheer brute strength and promised him the same, Naruto swallowed his protests and steeled his resolve. He would do his damned best to become strong. He was Naruto Uzumaki, the boy who never gave up. After he took a bath, the boy was told to work on his Rasengan. As the Toad Sage revealed, it was an excellent chakra control exercise, while they were on the road. When he asked Jiraiya for their destination, the sage answered with a smile. It's a secret. You're free to ask me anything but this for now. And so Naruto asked, both of his teachers, everything that passed through his mind, from chakra theory to hunting to the reason the sky was blue. A question that was actually answered by Fukasaku, whose response left Naruto with more questions than he thought possible. The boy asked relentlessly, exploring the vast wealth of experience and knowledge the two sages possessed. The days passed as the group trailed through the forest, Fukasaku going at his own convenience and frequently called back by Jiraiya. A routine settled for the boy. Every other day, he would push his body to its limit by going through a regimen devised by Jiraiya himself before sparring with a bunchen of the Toad Sage, with the objective to dispel it. Naruto had only gotten himself trashed for now, but he could tell he was learning, his teacher frequently halting the fight to show him tricks and techniques. The least of them were the various ways to throw an efficient punch with one's maximum bodyweight behind. Naruto had solid muscles already, but once Jiraiya explained to the boy the concept of momentum in a way the blonde could understand, it had been like enlightenment. The blonde's brand of taijutsu was chaotic and already full of motions. The goal was now to make each movement as useful and hurtful as possible. Fukasaku was insistent for Naruto to practice his katas. According to the little old toad, they were a good solution to get him the discipline he sorely needed. Constating quickly that the simple way would not work, the blonde failing to muster any enthusiasm, Fukasaku made him do it while sticking on a tree trunk while the elderly sage peppered him with little rocks that Naruto was supposed to intercept or escape according to each motion. Those were the days they would not move. While they were on the road, however, they were not idle. Naruto would make 2 clones to whom Fukasaku gave scrolls and books, after forbidding Jiraiya from giving them one of his little orange books. They had tested his abilities to efficiently remember information, and apparently, 2 replicas was his limit for now. The clones would then proceed to pester Jiraiya with questions about their reading materials. The blondes had been hesitant at first, considering it was mainly complicated vocabulary that the original did not know, but once Jiraiya ordered them to speak, they complied. Naruto was certain he had seen something dark flash in the Toad Sage's eyes, but it had been too fast. The boy himself would work on his Rasengan, trying his hardest to do it one-handed. The swirling, miniature maelstrom of chakra really was eluding him. He could not wrap his head around how to control the chaotic tides of his chakra within such a tight sphere, all the while keeping the multiple rotations going at a pace sufficient to generate destruction. 2 weeks went by when the duo finally reached the place Jiraiya had in mind. It was a small village hidden in the forest. The first signs Naruto could recognize were the various trails his increased knowledge allowed him to pick up. A few of them looked worn, used, and clean, all signs of humans' passage. Then, the smell of the ambient woods changed and Naruto actually climbed up a tree when he recognized the scent of smoke. From his position, he saw 2 tall chimneys puffing cloud of gray smoke. Eventually, they reached the first houses and the boy realized the village was barely bigger than the Hyuga compound in Konoha. It was in a clearing of a sort, surrounded by walls of wooden spikes, more to keep prowlers outside than a real defensive measure. There were still a few tall trees within the walls, 5 very imposing iron oaks, and Naruto could see there was some sort of house-like structures high up in the branches. The cry of a migrating hawk was heard and Naruto's eyes caught the forms of guards roosted in the trees. They had been spotted. "Welcome to the halls of the Fuma clan, Naruto," said Jiraiya with a smile. Fuma clan? One of the very few shinobi clans not part of any shinobi village thought they swore loyalty to Fire Country and they have a treaty with Konoha. Really? How does that work? The blonde's questioning was stopped when 2 men approached them. They were both tall and their sleeveless attire revealed strong arms marred with scars. Their eyes were the color of hazelnut and their hair was dark. "Lord Jiraiya," one of the guards greeted. "Welcome to Mori no Goten." The Toad Sage returned the greeting with a nod. "Good day to you, Fuma-san. May I announce you to Lord Fuma?" "Yes. Tell him I'm here for Konoha usual business as well as a favor." "It shall be done." Naruto and his teacher were then escorted to the largest house in the middle of the village, next to which the 2 chimneys the blonde had spotted earlier were standing. Long before they neared the longhouse, a rumor buzzed in the boy's ears. A heavy, metallic sound and a hum that resonated within his chest. When they finally approached, he understood better. A dozen of smiths were gathered at around the 2 chimneys, busying themselves with red, scalding hot ingots of steel which they were molding with great strength and precision into weapons. "Does the Fuma shuriken comes from them, sensei?" Jiraiya nodded. "Good deduction, Naruto. Yes, they invented it. The Fuma are excellent metal workers." Naruto smiled excitedly. He had never been allowed to visit any of the forges in Konoha. He knew they were all gathered along the Naka River to stave off arson risk. "I've never been near a smithy. The ones in Konoha are closed off to the public. We can't allow possible enemies to sabotage them. They are a vital part of our business, you know. That's also why the Hokage Tower owns them." Naruto glanced at his teacher uncomprehendingly. "Really? Why?" "Well, without a steady stream of good weapons, we couldn't properly fight, right? And if the forges were owned by a private party, they could decide to just leave at any time and we can't have that. That's why Konoha owns them." The boy's mouth formed an "oh" of comprehension. "I get it," he said, nodding happily. "It makes sense. Can you guess what else is under the village control in Konoha?" It took a minute for the boy to rack his brain for an answer. "The hospital, I guess? I'd also say all electricity production maybe?" "Why?" "Well, the hospital causes ninjas need to be healed for not too much money and we also need some supplies like chakra and blood pills, right?" The blonde answered, throwing an uncertain yet hopeful glance at his teacher. Jiraiya only motioned for Naruto to continue. "As for the electricity, well, The hospital needs to work properly so he can't be short. Also, I think the tower uses a lot of it, explained the boy hesitantly. Oh, and there are the emergency bunkers also. They need air conditioning or something. The toad sage nodded proudly and ruffled the boy's locks, earning him a look of mixed annoyance and satisfaction as well as a grin. You're completely correct. For your information, parts of the farmlands around the village are also supervised by the Akamichi clan in the name of the Hokage to ensure a consistent food source, and the Nara clan ensure the wells and the Naka River aren't polluted. Those lazy asses? Naruto exclaimed, but before his teacher could answer him, they were standing in front of two large doors, reinforced with iron. Two guards pushed the heavy panels and the one Fuma shinobi accompanying them stepped inside the great hall. Lord Jiraiya of Konoha and his escort. The toad sage glanced towards his student. Hanzaki, their leader, is very insistent on etiquette, so please, let me talk and stay silent, whispered Jiraiya with his eyes bulging out of their sockets and staring intensely at the blonde boy. Beside him, Naruto swallowed and nodded frantically. And Bo, his teacher whisper shouted as his last recommendation. They entered the hall proper. It was a long rectangular room, with both sides decorated by painted panels of rice paper. They featured men and women alike fighting, forging, and building the very house they were in right now. The one common element to all the paintings was the easily recognizable sword held each time by a different person. The same sword that now stood sheathed next to a throne, upon which a tall, intimidating dark-haired man was seated. Behind him was one last painting. A man with hair the color of fire was tearing from the maws of a dragon a single sharp tooth. Naruto glanced from the painting above the Fuma leader to the sword next to him, back to the panel and back to the sword. The blonde boy paled before his eyes widened in excitement. Was the sword really what he thought it was? How absolutely awesome was that? Good day to you, Fuma Dono. May you live long and be prosperous. Jiraiya greeted with a nod, elbowing Naruto for the boy to bow. Good day to you, Sanin no Jiraiya. What brings you here today? I'm here to conclude business with the esteemed Fuma clan, both in the name of my village Konoha and in mine. Hanzaki nodded. Very well, you shall state your demands soon. But first, who is this companion of yours? He is Naruto Uzumaki and he is my apprentice, as well as the reason I ask you to return the favor you owe me, Fuma Dono. Sakura Haruno, the one genin of Team 7 left in Konoha, stared at the sky as she leaned against one of the training posts in exercise ground number 3. Both her teammates had left, one on a training trip with one of the Densetsu no Sanin and the other she did not want to think about too much. Yet her train of thoughts did not leave her with much of a choice. It hurt, her chest felt torn, ripped apart, clawed open, but she could not do anything about it. She had offered her love to the Uchiha and she had been refused. She had offered him her loyalty and she had been rebuked. She had then made Naruto promise to bring him back and she had been disappointed. In the wake of the failed retrieval mission, she was left with the pieces of her heart to gather and too many questions. Why had Sasuke thanked her? Why had he refused she follow him? Why couldn't she have found the courage to pursue? Did she think so little of her blonde teammate? She wanted to think that the Uchiha had acknowledged her feelings, that he had been afraid for her, and that maybe it meant one day he could love her in return. Once all this bloody affair was said and done. As for why she had not pursued, she had simply trusted Naruto to succeed with his mission, to achieve the impossible like the boy had a knack for doing. One part of her brain, however, kept whispering that he was a traitor, that he had joined Orochimaru of all people, Konoha's foremost missing nin. This corner of her mind would murmur day and night that Sasuke had simply told her there was no place for anything but revenge in his heart, that she could not follow because she was weak, and the fact she had not been part of the retrieval mission was ample proof of that. The worst was probably how she had considered Naruto, or rather, how she had not considered him at all. Those who break the rules were trash and those who abandoned their teammates were worse than trash. Sasuke and she had betrayed the one thing their sensei had taught them, only Naruto upholding the man's teaching. Her duty as a ninja, her allegiance to Konoha, but most importantly her loyalty to her teammate had seemed so insignificant during those few seconds when love had won over reason. Yet she loved Sasuke, she loved him so much. She needed to love him, needed to believe it was real and inexhaustible like the love of fairy tales because this love was everything she had, everything she was. Sakura had built so much of herself around it that it terrified her that some part of her thought as she did. After all, who would Sakura Haruno be if she stopped loving Sasuke Uchiha? No one, that was what. However, she was not sure she liked the cowardly, useless, and traitorous Sakura Haruno who was so madly in love with the Uchiha heir. The sight of Neji, Choji, Kiba carried bleeding and listless through the village's gates still gave her nightmares. The thought she had been ready to betray made her shudder. The broken smile of Naruto as he promised her to bring their teammate back, Naruto who loved them both, Sasuke like a brother but her so much more than a sister, was haunting her. Sakura felt a sob escape her and cried in the palm of her hands as she searched for, and could not find, neither who she was nor who she wanted to be. Naruto stood alone outside of the house the Fuma clan had allocated to Jiraiya and him. The Toad Sage was discussing with the village leader important stuff concerning Konoha and whatever treaty there was between the clan and the village. The boy did not begrudge the man the time away from him. It was important Konoha business, after all, something about shipments of refined iron ore to aliment the village's forges. It was a breath of fresh air for Naruto too. He had worked hard for the past week but kept failing, and while Jiraiya had never mocked him and had always a sympathetic smile for him, his gaze did feel judgmental at times. This was the reason why the blonde was once again trying his damnedest to produce a Rasengan with one hand only. His eyes were narrowed in focus on the mark Jiraiya had placed in the palm of his right hand. Naruto blinked to avoid a bead of sweat from falling in his eyes. Withdrawing within himself, the blonde reached for his chakra. To use the life energy coursing along a ninja's coils was an exercise impossible to describe to those who were not initiated. It required as much mental concentration as it was taxing physically. His Jiji used to compare it to calligraphy, each stroke needing to be both powerful yet precise to form the kanji, leaving the exact amount of ink needed on the paper. Any smear, any smudge, any tremor from the hand, any inattention from the mind, and that was as much chakra wasted. Naruto did not know the first thing about calligraphy. For him, molding chakra felt like a battle. An uphill crusade he was fighting against himself. The boy followed the technique taught in the academy to gather chakra. He first focused on a mental point between his eyes and inhaled deeply. A small flame of power ignited in his forehead, his spiritual energy burning brightly. As oxygen rushed to his lungs, he willed his focus to move down with the air he was gulping down, imagining the point to swirl around in his hara counterclockwise. The little fire was drowned by the sea of Naruto's immensely vast and dense physical power. As he exhaled, Naruto released the built-up chakra in the palm of his hand, trying his best to keep it swirling within the confines of a ball-sized sphere. His mind was stretched between two opposites, keeping the boundary calm and steady, conflicting directly with the spiraling flux he had to maintain inside. Sweat dampened his brow and his hand shook under the pressure. His back was tense and perspiration was rolling in between his shoulder blades. Naruto gritted his teeth in furious concentration. The tip of his nose felt itchy. With a violent gust of wind, the Rasengan exploded, scorching Naruto's hand badly and rocking the boy backwards. With a pained yell, the blonde sprawled on the ground. Mumbling all kind of curse, Naruto slowly sat on his bottom and sighed. Why was he incapable of doing this stupid jutsu one-handed? Why did he feel like fighting a war against himself each time he was molding chakra? With a cry of frustration, the boy lay back down and allowed his breathing to calm down. His hand was hurting, like it had been squashed under a rock and grilled over a fire, and bleeding. He did not feel like trying again anyway. He was sore, exhausted, and mad. This jutsu was stupid, his chakra was stupid, and he was stupid. With forces like that working against him, it was no wonder he could not make it. He furrowed his brows and shook his head with a groan. He could not think like that. Hard work was his middle name, or he was not Naruto Uzumaki anymore. Propping himself up, he looked at his maimed hand and grimaced. If Tsunade Bachan could see him right now, she would bonk him on the head for hurting himself like that while training. Steadying his trembling right with his left hand and winced, it was starting to hurt badly. Once again, he focused on the point between his eyes and breathed in, plunging his spiritual force in the ocean of his physical might. He was all brawn and no brain. Stupid him, no wonder the flame was so dim. Chakra erupted violently from his right hand and with a cry, Naruto knocked himself down. Glaring at his lame hand, he gnawed his teeth to suppress a yell. The Yondaime was a genius and Jiraiya was one of the legendary 3 ninjas. How was he supposed to get this dumb jutsu down? He was the dead last, there was no way he would manage it. Even his master knew it. The boy had noted how Jiraiya would look at him and see someone else, someone more talented. Naruto closed his injured hand in a tight fist and squeezed hard, blood seeping in between his fingers. The pain made him scream and he felt a weight momentarily lifted from his chest when he hollered it to the world. "Hello, are you alright?" The unknown voice, young and girly, made Naruto whirl with a yelp, his right hand already grasping a kunai fished from his pouch. He yelped again at the pain that flared in his hand as he gripped the weapon and relaxed reflexively, dropping the knife. In front of him was a girl around his age with chocolate brown eyes wide open, a fleeting, gentle smile on her lips, and carrot-colored hair flowing out from under a blue beanie. The boy eyed her warily and sighed. Yeah, I'm alright," answered the boy. The girl eyed his hand and the smile she had on her lips slipped to a downward curl. "Are you sure?" she asked again, pointing toward the boy's obvious wound with worry clear in her brown orbs. Naruto squeezed his hand hard and pushed it inside his pocket. Who was this girl? Why did she care about him anyway? He was not asking for anyone's pity. The blonde frowned, snarled even. "I'm fine," he said dismissively. "What's it to you anyway? I have work to do, I can't talk." The girl's worried expression morphed into a sneer. "Well, sorry to show concern, Mr. Super Rude. You can keep your broken hand, see if I care." The Fuma girl spat before stomping away. Naruto was stuck in indecision for a second and decided to stick out his tongue and blow a raspberry to the retreating back of the girl. He was not Mr. Super Rude. She was interrupting his training, Ibeo. His training he was failing so miserably at anyhow. Naruto grimaced and felt his insides twist and turn in a way he found particularly awful. The boy forced a snarl on his face and gritted his teeth. Pulling his hand from his pocket, he observed it and sighed. It was looking more like hacked meat from the market than like a properly functioning hand. Dragging his feet inside the house, he took the first aid kit Jiraiya had insisted he pack before leaving Konoha. With a groan, he quickly realized he had no idea what to use or even do. There were some creams and bombs, but each description was written in super complicated words he did not know. Groaning, he decided to try and bandage his wound, only to realize he had to do it with one hand and his teeth. He was so stupid. Idiot Naruto. Why had he been so mean to the friendly girl? Maybe she could have helped him. He sighed at the result of his best effort to bandage himself and banged his head against the wall. Jiraiya was not pleased. No, maybe he actually was. Okay, Jiraiya truthfully was not sure. The Fuma clan leader had accepted the renewal of the long-standing contract they had with Konoha. The Fuma clan was one of the primary extractors of ore in the Land of Fire and Konoha did rely heavily on them to forge their arsenal. The problem was that they had been approached by a third party trying to convince them to stop selling their metal to the Leaf Village, and given the description Hanzaki had given him of the envoys, it screamed of Orochimaru. The Fuma clan had refused given Sound also wanted access to the treasure kept in the Temple of the Dragon. However, it still meant that, in a bit less than a year, the Fuma clan would expect their loyalty to be compensated by a raise from Konoha's payment, given how much Otto had offered them. It was annoying, as it would make a dent in the village's treasury that the village simply had to pay. Outsourcing ore production to a company outside of Fire Country was not reasonable, as it could be easily sabotaged by another foreign power. Every major ninja village knew the danger of being short on steel to forge. However, it was also an opportunity to trace Orochimaru's network and destroy some of the traitorous man's operation, maybe even locate the base where he was keeping his last prize. Kami knew his old teammate was an evasive man, and any hint on his activities was good to take, even if they often led to abandoned hideouts. Jiraiya was musing about all that when he entered the home the Fuma had given them, only to see Naruto glaring at his right hand like it was some kind of untamed animal. The Toad Sage immediately noticed it was badly bandaged and bleeding through the gaze. "What did you do to yourself, Naruto?" the man questioned. The blonde looked at him with eyes that held of so many emotions Jiraiya was not sure he could decipher them all. In fewer words, the boy felt like shit. The large white-haired man chuckled. "Let me see that," said Jiraiya with a patient tone. Wordlessly but with a grimace affixed to his face, Naruto presented his hand to his teacher. The toad sage removed the useless bandage and sighed. "You're going too hard, Naruto," remarked the man. "You won't get the Rasengan tomorrow, especially if you reduced yourself to minced meat while trying." The blonde grumbled something about the overall stupidity of things and pouted. Jiraiya smiled lightly. Ah, adolescence, what a magnificent stage of life it was. "Look," he said to the mute boy, "why don't you try to work on your other jutsus? Any good ninja can do a Kawarimi without hand sign, same for the henge." Naruto looked up. "Without hand sign?" he asked skeptically. Jiraiya nodded sagely. Yup. It requires good chakra control to reduce the hand signs necessary for a jutsu. If you are good enough, you can remove them entirely. So, why don't you try your hand?" The man chuckled at that. The blonde deadpanned. Oh, I'm so amused." Jiraiya cocked one of his brows and pressed firmly on the boy's wounded hand that he was rubbing with a balm. Ow, you're hilarious, sensei. Hilarious. Naruto squirmed. The toad sage relaxed the pressure and massaged the harmed flesh delicately. "I'm serious, Naruto. Rasengan is a very difficult jutsu. It is the peak of shape manipulation. Once you can do it, everything else becomes easier, so don't expect to master it right now. You have 2.5 years with me, boy." Naruto looked at his sensei intently for a second before he averted his gaze and sighed. Mumbling something in his breath again, the boy scratched his head. "I'm sorry, what?" Jiraiya asked, genuinely having not heard what the boy had whispered. Naruto heated up and his face took a crimson hue, but he breathed in deeply and armed himself with as much courage as he could as he repeated it louder. I just wanted to make you proud," he stuttered. "You look at me like you expect better and the boy's voice died before he could say everything. Jiraiya sighed and circled an arm around the boy's shoulders. Naruto acted tough, spoke loudly, and grinned a lot, but he was nothing but goo on the inside. Emotionally starved, fragile, and gooey. The man smiled sadly to himself at the image, the guilt weighing on him like a hammer. The white-haired sage took a deep breath. "I do expect things from you, Naruto." The boy seemed to wilt in his embrace like a flower dying in fast forward. "I expect them because I believe, no, because I know you will do them. I expect you to master the Rasengan because I'm certain you can do it," continued the man, and he immediately felt Naruto perking up from under his one-armed hug. "It's true that." Jiraiya stopped and sighed, apparently hesitating. "What is it, sensei? I told you I trained the Yondaime, right?" The boy nodded and lowered his gaze. He was right after all. Jiraiya did compare with someone infinitely more talented than he was. Minato had very good chakra control and a few advantages in the knowledge department, began Jiraiya. When he heard the heart-wrenching sigh Naruto let out, the sage shook the boy slightly. However, he was totally girly. He exclaimed suddenly with a laugh. "You're way ahead when it comes to physical strength." Apparently, it was not the thing to say, as Naruto hung his head low, a black cloud raining over it as he muttered something about all brawn and no brain. "Don't beat yourself up, Naruto. Everyone has their strength and weaknesses. You'll be a better taijutsu user than the Yondaime ever was, and you got a working Rasengan in a month, boy. You'll get it down, I know you will." "Know what? I know you'll make it better." "You sure?" Naruto asked in a small voice where hope pierced nonetheless. "Absolutely, positively, completely, entirely." Okay, I get it." Naruto interrupted with a huff, but he was smiling broadly and chuckling. Jiraiya smiled back. "Thanks, sensei," said the boy. "Chakra control is hard," he added thoughtfully. The sage nodded. "That it is. There is a reason Tsunade is famous for having perfect dominion over her chakra. However, I can let you in on a little secret." Naruto perked up. "Really? What is it?" Even for her, it was atrociously difficult. Tsunade is 3/4 Senju and 1/4 Uzumaki. Even young, she had lots of chakra. It was only because she dreamed of becoming a medic that she got it perfectly leashed. The blonde nodded before he frowned. Why did she want to become a healer? Jiraiya's face darkened for a second, but Naruto missed that. The white-haired man shook his head. "That's a story for her to tell. I don't know the specifics." "Oh, okay." Silence settled around them and Naruto leaned into the hug for a minute before he disentangled himself from the sage's embrace and scratched the back of his head. Say, sensei? Yeah? How do I, apologize to a girl I've been rude to? Jiraiya's eyebrow shot up in his hairline before it came down and wiggled a little dance. Oh, little Naruto found a girl? The blonde flushed red and flailed around for a second before he got up and screamed. It's not like that, pervy sage. Be serious, please. The man rose his hands in surrender. Okay, what is it? Naruto breathed in and out to calm himself and remove the blush from his face. Well, I was practicing and I hurt myself, and there was this girl who was nice, but because I was frustrated I behaved like an ass, guessed Jiraiya. Naruto nodded. Well, allowed Jiraiya-sama, the gentleman hermit, to help you solve your problems with the fairer, young disciple. The man said as he took his chin in his right hand and stroked an exaggerated thoughtful pose. Naruto rolled his eyes at the antics of the gallant Jiraiya, but waited. If you want to do it real classy, you can gift her something. The boy hummed. That made sense, but then what? He would have said ramen first, but something was telling it was not such a good choice. Although, maybe the girl liked it, perchance? Maybe she liked eating, so he could offer to pay for lunch? Yes, he could pay for some ramen. Ramen? Oi, Naruto, focus will you? The boy startled. Sorry, pervy sage, what did you say? I asked what she looked like. Naruto shrugged. Honestly, if it was not Sakura-chan, he did not really pay attention to girls. She had orange hair. And brown eyes. Orange hair? Yeah, kinda like carrot, you see? Jiraiya smiled. There were not many people with orange hair in the Fuma clan. In fact, at all time, there were only 2 at most. Suddenly, the blonde's eyes widened and his right fist impacted his left palm. Naruto grimaced but grinned excitedly anyway. I know, he said, fishing for the pendant Tsunade had given him. I can give her that. Girls like this kind of thing, right? Jiraiya frowned and slowly shook his head. I'm not sure it's a good idea, Naruto. The boy deflated like a pierced balloon. Why? The toad sage anchored his eyes to Naruto's, his dark orbs peering into blue ones. Well, this pendant represents your promise to Tsunade, right? It's the sign you'll become Hokage someday. Jiraiya silently swore when Naruto wilted and sat back down, a defeated look on his face. The boy was eyeing the pendant in his head, his eyes heavy with nostalgia, almost longing, but for what, the sage could not guess. It's been a while, I haven't thought about it, whispered the boy gently, feeling the strangely warm sensation of the little green gemstone under his fingers. The toad sage chose to say nothing, waiting on his student to elaborate if he wanted. A minute stretched into 2 before the blonde slightly shook his head. His gaze was lost in the shimmers of the stone, but his eyes were not seeing them. I'm not sure, whispered the blonde eventually. Jiraiya waited, but it became clear soon that the boy would not say more. With one hand, he closed Naruto's around the necklace, while he squeezed the boy's shoulder. He knew Naruto confronting himself would bring some things to light that would change his godson, but Jiraiya was committed now. Naruto deserved to become a strong man and not stay a desperate child forever. It's okay not to be. Take time to think. Now how about we think about your girl problem? An hour later, Naruto was walking through the village, his head darting to and fro as he searched for the orange-headed girl. Jiraiya had been no help whatsoever in finding a present to properly apologize to the girl, but at least, his ridiculous and over-the-top propositions had brought back a smile on Naruto's face. Pervy sage. Truly it was a title fit for the older man. The blonde explored the little village, curiosity guiding his step as much as purpose. The place was totally different than Konoha. Firstly, his hometown was many times larger. To this day, Naruto was not sure why exactly everyone insisted Konoha was a village. Secondly, the Fuma lived with the forest, not simply in it. There were traces of such a lifestyle in Konoha still, but they were all drowned in the modernity of newer buildings. The Nara clan, for example, lived deep in a wooden portion of Konoha in a manner that was reminiscent of the Fuma way. Thirdly, people of the Fuma clan looked much more serious than anyone in Konoha. They all wore shades of green and brown. Nowhere could the bright colors the Konohan affection be seen. Not to say that they were unfriendly. They would nod at Naruto for a terse greeting and go do their business. The boy was not offended, he understood those were their customs. If he had to be honest, it felt pretty nice. Nicer than Konoha to say the least, where people would go out of their way to avoid him and refused to look at him. Naruto shook his head. He did not want to dwell on that for now, he had someone to apologize to. It took Naruto another 20 minutes before he finally found the person he was looking for. He was ready to call after her but stopped when he saw what she was doing. The carrot-haired girl held a Yumi bow and had an arrow at the ready, a look of complete focus on her face. He decided to observe quietly and searched for the target. His eyes widened when he saw the mannequin the girl was targeting. It was very, very far away. With a deep breath, the archer positioned the bow horizontally above her head before she righted it vertically, drawing it in the same motion until the feathers of the arrow came under her ear, against her cheek. Naruto heard her exhale and suddenly, she appeared completely motionless for a single second. Without warning, the blonde was startled by an angry whistle followed, a second after, by the impact of the arrow piercing the mannequin's head at least 80 paces away. He stared at the arrow then at the girl. "Amazing," the blonde exclaimed, startling the carrot-haired girl. "You're super good." The girl blushed slightly at the compliment before recognition flashed in her eyes and she blushed from anger. She huffed and crossed her arms, still holding her bow. "Oh, it's Mr. Super Rude. What do you want?" Naruto was stopped in his tracks by the girl's tone and remembered sheepishly what he had come here for originally. The boy scratched the back of his head and breathed deeply before he bowed. "I'm really sorry," he exclaimed, folded horizontally at the waist at a perfect 90-degree angle. "I was frustrated by my training not going well and I was rude to you. I have no excuse and I apologize deeply," the blonde said. It was most unyouthful, he felt compelled to add after a second, he did not know why. The girl observed him quizzically in stunned silence before she giggled. Naruto peered up from his bow to see she was holding a hand over her mouth. That made him frown and he straightened up. "Oi, I'm serious you know?" The girl nodded with a smile. No, it's just I've never had anyone bow to me like that. That deeply I mean." She smirked. "I'll forgive you if you bow to me again." Naruto glared, not certain she was serious or not but not daring to say anything. He had been rude first after all. With a sigh, he bowed again and heard the girl barely holding her laughter. "Apologies accepted, stranger," she said mirthfully. The blonde stood proud again and watched the girl with mildly annoyed eyes. "What's your name?" "Mine is Sasama," the girl said, offering her hand. Naruto shook it hesitantly. "Naruto Uzumaki." Sasama smiled. "Peace?" Naruto returned her grin. "Peace," he nodded approvingly. "So, you're training with a bow?" "Yup. Is it hard?" the boy questioned, genuinely curious about the practice as it was not something seen in Konoha. Sasama nodded proudly. "It's a lot of hard work to get everything right." She eyed the bow in her hands and seemed to hesitate for a few seconds before she looked at the boy. "Wanna try?" "Sure," Naruto exclaimed with enthusiasm. As it turned out, shooting a bow was indeed complicated. It required a certain kind of leashed strength yet a relaxed grip, a precise motion before perfect stillness, an acute eye and good balance as well as patience. Naruto's injured hand, albeit already getting better, did not help the boy achieving any feat of archery. An hour later, the boy was sweaty and his left eye was twitching from being closed too long to aim. His arms were hurting, the motions necessary to draw a bow not what he was accustomed to. "That's hard," commented the boy as he and Sasama were walking toward the mannequin to retrieve the arrows. "You're really strong," he added with warmth and admiration. The carrot-haired girl blushed. "Well, you didn't do too badly considering it was your first time." Naruto watched her excitedly. "Really? You think so?" Sasama nodded. "Yes." The blonde beamed at her in thanks. "Thanks, Sasama-chan." He did not notice the girl choking on her saliva as he skipped ahead of her and began pulling the arrows off the target. The two teens practiced for another half an hour, Naruto making absolutely no progress in his endeavor and ultimately choosing to observe the girl he was with. Sasama's form progressively got worse and worse under the attentive blue eyes that were anchored to her, despite the enthusiastic exclamations of the boy. The girl was flushing red when she decided she had enough. Barely able to look at Naruto straight, she gathered her arrow and removed the string from her bow. "I'm done for today," she announced. "I'll go bath." Say, Sasama-chan, how about we get something to eat?" "You choose, my treat." The girl once again nearly choked and milled around for a second. Are you sure?" Naruto nodded with a broad smile. "You didn't have to teach me how to use the boy, I want to thank you." Sasama, for a second, had the distinct impression someone was trying to cook an egg on her face. She inhaled deeply and nodded. Sure, Naruto. Meet me here in half an hour. Sure, see you later Sasama-chan. 35 minutes later exactly, a freshly showered Naruto, even he knew when he smelled bad, was waiting for the girl grumbling things about perverted teachers. He had been allowed to go only after being relentlessly teased by his master, to whom he had had to explain where and how exactly he was intending to spend his evening. The blonde boy had protested vigorously that it was definitely not like that, to which the toad sage had chuckled with a knowing look on his face and had insisted Naruto wear something else than his orange ensemble. When Naruto had told him he did not have anything else, the toad sage had smiled broadly and then proceeded to wrestle the boy inside a dark blue kimono with an orange spiral in the back and closed by an orange obi. The boy shuffled from feet to feet inside the unfamiliar attire. He was quite uncomfortable, the sleeves were too long, and it felt so girly, and it was bullshit because it was probably the most comfortable thing he had ever worn in his life. He was not going to admit to that to his teacher anytime soon though. And it still felt girly. He was musing about all that with a frown on his face when the rustle of clothes came to his ears. He turned with a smile and a greeting that got stuck in his throat. Sasama had her hair tied in a simple bun kept in place by an expensive-looking comb decorated with nacre, 2 long bangs framing her face. She was dressed in a kimono, except hers was soft green with white blossoming flowers decorating the bottom and her sleeves. A black obi held the robe closed. Naruto swallowed hard. He was not sure why, though. "Hey, Sasama-chan," he exclaimed with an uncomfortably dry mouth. "Hey, Naruto-san," answered the girl in a more subdued tone. The boy could not keep his eyes from roaming over the girl's form and Sasama flushed. She coughed lightly and Naruto's face heated up. Damn it, his super pervert of a teacher had to make everything so awkward, calling it a romantic evening and forcing Naruto into a fancy kimono. He liked Sakura-chan anyways. Sasama-chan did look cute though, and she had those pretty orange hair and those shining brown eyes. The boy mentally screamed and shook his head, intent on taking back control over the situation. "Let's go, Sasama-chan, you choose," he said with a shaky grin. The girl smiled. It was a discreet upturning of her lips and nodded firmly before walking ahead. Naruto simply followed suit. As she led them to a simple-looking restaurant, the two walked in silence, the boy racking his brain to find a subject they could discuss. Eventually, he decided to ask her a bit more about her archery skills. Sasama was eager to answer any questions he had. They promptly arrived and got seated without questions. Naruto noticed that Sasama seemed to get a lot of respect, the hosts bowing deeper to her than to him. When they got the menu, the boy was silently happy to see he had largely enough in his trusty wallet, Gama-chan, to afford anything here. One order later and the two resumed their discussion, the subject slowly shifting from archery to a whole lot of different topics. Sasama had ninja training, but she had a special role in the Fuma clan. People born with orange hair were born once in a generation in the village and they were marked with special chakra. As such, they were trained in the clan's secret ways. The girl apologized but refused to say more, which Naruto understood, and were tasked with serving the Temple of the Dragon within the Fuma territory. "You really have a dragon?" Naruto exclaimed excitedly, remembering the impressive paintings inside the Great Hall. Sasama giggled. "I don't know actually, I'm still a trainee, I've never been inside the temple proper." Their food arrived, momentarily interrupting the girl. After a short, "itadakimasu," the boy decided to plunge, literally, in his dish and inhale as much food as he could at once. It was really good food. Sasama frowned ever so slightly but resumed her tale. "According to our legends, the first of our clan tore the tooth of Kutatsu*sama out of his mouth to forge the great cleaver following his instruction, and since then, it is our tradition to forge all kind of weapons." Naruto looked ready to explode, his mouth stuffed with brown rice. "That's so cool, Tt Ibeo," he shouted, positively vibrating. "What does that got to do with your hair though?" The girl smiled her small smile. "Well, we call it the mark of fire," Sasama explained proudly, apparently happy to have a virgin ear to regal with her clan stories. "Those who have it can enter the temple and serve Kutatsu-sama." Naruto was awestruck before a thought suddenly occurred to him that made him flush red to the root of his hair. He swallowed what he had in his mouth with a loud gulp. So, are you actually, like, a princess? The boy asked, suddenly self-conscious of his relatively poor table manners. Sasama lost her smile and looked down before a huge sigh escaped her lips. She stayed silent for a few seconds that seemed to stretch to infinity. Yeah, I suppose I'm, kinda, she said sadly. Sasama-chan? The girl looked up at the worried boy. You're not gonna be my friend now that you know, right? She remarked in a despondent voice. Wa? Naruto asked, truly not understanding the sudden mood shift. Sasama shook her head. Everyone here, they treat me, they respect me but they don't. The girl teared up. The other girls my age, they don't really want to be friends with me. They say they can't, so I thought. I'm your friend, Sasama-chan, believe it. Naruto exclaimed in a whisper shout that was much more shout than a whisper if the turning heads were any indications. Really? Really? I won't even bow to you anymore, 'twas a one-time deal. Naruto said, nodding, an arm crossed in front of him. And I'll hang out with you for as long as I'm here. I know, you can teach me archery. The girl could only give a teary, albeit thankful, smile to the blonde boy. I'm sorry for my table manner, though, remarked Naruto, scratching the back of his head. They suck bad. Sasama giggled and proceeded to show the boy how to maintain etiquette in the presence of nobility. He was informed that suck was not a word to use in good company either. The rest of the evening disappeared somewhere before the two teens could realize it, and soon, Naruto was escorting Sasama home, something his pervert of a teacher had insisted he did. The boy thought it was kind of weird, given Sasama had ninja training, could probably kick ass, and they were in the middle of her village, but he was not good with all the subtleties of a date. The boy nearly choked on his saliva and flushed at the thought that it had really been like a date after Jiraiya had explained the commonly understood meaning of the word. Naruto had never known before tonight that what he called a date was not what the rest of the world called a date. For the blonde, it simply meant a friendly excursion between a boy and a girl. He still felt sheepish at the fact he had not known that it was used to describe a romantic outing. No wonder Sakura-chan had kept hitting him for asking over and over if she wanted to go with him on one. He had only wanted to become friend with her during their time at the academy. He had never meant to pester her like that. Then he had made it some sort of challenge, part of his stupid rivalry with Sasuke to get her to accompany him, another part of his desperate fight for attention. It had not been genuine anymore, not entirely. He did not feel like he deserved most of her hits on the head, but considering he partly wanted to use Sakura for an ego boost, some were not entirely lost. He liked Sakura-chan, but truthfully, he did not know how he liked her. Naruto-kun? The blonde startled and sheepishly scratched the back of his head. Thinking of a girl while escorting another somehow had to be bad manners. Sorry, Sasama-chan, I was kinda thinking. The girl giggled. I saw that. I was telling you we are here. Really? The boy looked around and saw they were standing in front of a large house with an imposing door. You opened that alone? Sasama giggled again. No silly, I take the side entrance. So, the girl looked down. See you tomorrow? She asked hopefully as her eyes glanced up. Naruto smiled widely. Sure, I can't wait to shoot the bow again. Sasama smiled and breathed deeply before she pecked the boy on his cheek and ran away with her face as red as her hair. The blonde stood there for a full minute, stunned. Slowly, his hand rose to his cheek where Sasama had barely pressed her lips. A large, stupid, goofy grin blossomed on his face and stretched his whisker marks. Naruto got home while smiling dumbly, not even caring about Jiraiya's knowing grin and wiggling eyebrows. His teacher was a super pervert, but he was of good counsel. The blonde flopped on his bed and fell asleep with a happy sigh. The next day, the Toad Sage informed his student that they would stay in the Fuma village for a while and that he had his benediction to hang out with whoever he wanted and encouraged the boy to learn archery. He simply warned the blonde that new skills were only good to develop if the intent was to become a master. In other words, if Naruto was only going to flirt with the girl, they might as well depart now. It was either all or nothing. The boy sputtered and protested until he was short of breath and ran away, calling his sensei a pervert and swearing he would become awesome with a bow. Dat bao. Jiraiya chuckled as he saw Naruto depart and turned his thoughts back to the deal Hanzaki and he had passed yesterday. The Toad Sage was hoping for Naruto to learn archery, The Fumas were not only smith masters after all, and their sharpshooters were extremely skilled. Learning Kaijutsu would be a good way to get the boy's mind off the drab routine they had already fallen into and maybe remove a few blocks on their path by teaching his student several things. Given the boy had already found his teacher, Hanzaki had decided to say nothing and only asked for Jiraiya to stay in Mori no Goron for a few days. The Fuma leader was expecting an attack of some kind after he had refused sound a first time, and the Toad Sage honestly agreed with the man. One did not refuse Orochimaru without consequences. Jiraiya cut his thumb and weaved through hand signs as his chakra rushed at his command. Slamming his bloodied palm on the ground, two little green toad wearing brown and maroon clothes appeared in front of him. "Gamako, Gamasho, how are you?" The one dressed in brown croaked. "We're fine, Jiraiya. Have something for us? I need you to keep watch over the area for me," explained the Toad Sage before he grimaced. "For something like a week, if that is okay with you." The maroon-clothed toad shrugged. "Sure, I didn't have anything planned. Did ya? Ya know I didn't, you oaf. What are we expecting exactly?" "Snakes," Jiraiya answered tersely. The two toads nodded with a grim face and suddenly faded into nothing. The sage grinned. Toads are the best." The second meeting between Naruto and Sasama was awkward at first, both teens incapable of looking the other in the eyes for a reason they could not fathom. It lasted for about a minute before Naruto took the girls by the hand and asked her to keep teaching him more archery. "Then we do what you want," offered the blonde, to which Sasama promptly agreed. Now that his injured right hand was healed properly, the boy made slow but steady progress under the guidance of Sasama. The morning was spent shooting and ended with half an hour of meditation, which Naruto weathered as patiently as he could. After a bath, the two teens met once again for lunch and Sasama took it upon herself to show the boy around. They kept at it until the girl excused herself, telling Naruto she had lessons to receive, but not before setting a time for a meeting later in the day. The boy did not mind and happily promised Sasama he would be there in the evening, and they each went their separate way. When Naruto reached the house, it was nearly 3 in the afternoon already. Jiraiya was nowhere to be seen, but there was a rolled scroll on the table with Naruto's name on it, so the boy decided to see what was inside. He unfurled the parchment to see a set of instructions illustrated by funny doodles on the Kawarimi and Henge jutsus and how to reduce the number of hand seals necessary to perform them. Naruto read the directives and was soon grateful for the small illustrations. His lacking vocabulary was still embarrassing, and the way some things were worded did not entirely make sense or seemed uselessly complicated to him, but the drawings were a big help in clearing things up. The blonde was beginning to understand why people were often insistent on using precise words with a precise meaning behind them. The simple, dumbed down, even he could admit they were just that, explanations he favored were emptied from a lot of details and clues about how to make the technique better, provided one had the necessary knowledge to piece everything together. Naruto he could follow instructions just well, but he realized he was incapable to truly make anything his as of now. The one exception was his Ujutsu, but even then, it was just an unconventional henge. Hence, the boy forced himself to carefully read the scroll. He soon summoned a clone as a sounding board of sort to make sure he was understanding everything. After half an hour of reading and exchanging with his replica, Naruto was realizing Kawarimi was a complex technique. The theory behind one of the simplest supplementary jutsu was easy. A ninja prepared a decoy in advance, simply sealing it on his person. The 5 hand seals, tiger, boar, ox, dog, and snake in that order, combined to unseal the decoy, catapult the ninja out of harm's way, and ensure the substitution was as seamless as could be. However, there were 100 of variations possible, and those made the technique truly interesting. One could henge the decoy into themselves, giving the enemy the impression they had successfully killed them. One could leave a henged decoy behind and rush the enemy. One could booby-trap the decoy. Naruto's prankster brain worked a mile a minute as he envisioned all the use such a simple jutsu could have. Could decoys be shadow clones? Could he simply catapult himself without leaving a decoy behind? Suddenly eager to try his hand at jutsu modification, Naruto stepped outside. Evening came sooner than the boy expected, and his clone had to remind him he was supposed to meet with Sasama. Followed a battle about whether or not Naruto was supposed to dress up again, a battle that ended with the boy decked once more in his blue kimono. Naruto was not sure if it was a win or a loss, however. Shrugging the impossible question for later, the boy walked through the village to Sasama's house, where the girl was waiting for him. She was wearing a different, cream-colored dress, with a pheasant embroidered on it. "Hi, Sasama-chan," the carrot-haired girl offered him her small smile. "Hey, Naruto, where should we go tonight?" The boy took his chin in his hand and mulled over the question. He did not know the village nearly enough to know any good place. He did know what he wanted to eat though. Scratching the back of his head, the blonde chuckled shyly. Would you mind ramen? Ramen? Sure, follow me, I know the place to go." "Yes, ramen," Naruto exclaimed, eagerly walking after the girl. The restaurant was a simple stand that was reminiscent of Ichiraku's ramen in Konoha, Naruto's one and only place to hang out. It was home to the two people who had always treated the boy normally. The blonde could not avoid drawing comparisons between the steaming noodle and Ichiraku's. The stools were slightly less comfortable, the smell of the broth less appetizing, the girl behind the counter had nothing on Ayame, and the cook did not look remotely as trustworthy as Tucci. Naruto had no doubt those were all very objective assessments, obviously. The teen ordered quickly and discussing once more, Sasama seeking to satiate her inextinguishable curiosity towards Konoha. The girl had stars in her eyes as Naruto did his best to describe his hometown. The two bowls of ramen interrupted them for a second and they dug in, the blonde taking greater care than usual to not eat disgustingly. Naruto had never inhaled ramen so slowly and so cleanly. "Do you have family, Sasama? I mean, I don't know, a singling?" the boy asked at one point. The girl's bright mood fell and Naruto fidgeted in his seat for a second before he took her head into his and smiled at her. "Sorry, didn't mean." "No, it's okay. It's just." The girl took a deep breath and squashed a tear with her free hand. "It's fresh." His name was Arashi. "He wasn't my brother exactly, more like a cousin, but I loved him like my older brother." Silence fell upon the two teens and Naruto squeezed Sasama's hand in a way he hoped would comfort her. The boy himself, as an orphan, as someone despised by his village, had no blood relative to lose. He had found people, however, who accepted him and the thought of them dying was terrifying. The death of the third Hokage, an old man he had come to see as a grandfather of sort and dared to call Gigi, was a wound that still hurt. Naruto knew it forever would. What happened? He and his companions got ambushed. We don't really know by whom. They did not come back, so we waited and waited and Sasama's breath shuddered. We sent another scouting party and they found traces of a battle and their clan insignias. No one of us would abandon that, ever, except if they were dead. Naruto nodded and gave her hand another squeeze. "I'm sorry." The girl blinked a few times to stifle her tears and shook her head. "It's okay," she protested in a broken pitch, her throat tight and her voice hoarse. "It's not why your fault." "Oh man, Sasama-chan, don't cry please," pleaded the boy as he flailed uselessly for a few seconds, not knowing what to do before he engulfed the girl in a hug. If it worked on him, it would work on Sasama. The girl cried harder and Naruto mentally kicked himself in the butt before he hugged her tighter. Getting up from his stool, the boy decided it was better if he did the escorting earlier tonight. As gently as he knew how to be, Naruto guided Sasama back to her home. When they reached the grand house, the girl was silently sniffling in his chest, but he was relieved that she had stopped crying outright. "You're home, Sasama," said the blonde gently. The girl mumbled something and snuggled tighter against him and he felt himself flush red as an unknown, pleasant warmth spread in his body. He hugged her tighter in response. They stood like that for a minute before the girl disentangled herself. Her cheeks were blushing a nice crimson and she was looking down, unable to meet Naruto's eyes. "Thanks," she whispered. The boy chuckled and scratched the back of his head. He, I did nothing but you're welcome." Silence fell once again upon the couple before Naruto broke it. "So see you tomorrow." Sasama nodded, still refusing to meet his gaze. "Why yeah." Naruto beamed. "Cool. Good night then, Sasama-chan." The girl took a deep breath and before the boy could react, she once again kissed him. On his lips this time. She fled, leaving a frozen Naruto behind. It was nice. That was all the boy could think about. He could go for seconds, actually. It might be better than ramen. Impossible. One minuscule part of his brain screamed. "Shut up, you stupid idiot." The rest retorted, "Yeah, it was definitely nice, much better than ramen even." The sensation was already disappearing, leaving only an unforgettable imprint in the boy's memory. Hot yet cool, soft, and impossibly sweet. Naruto did not even know how he had reached his bed, but the fact was that he did. Not bothering to remove the kimono, he distractedly loosened the obi and plopped face first on his bed to try and hide the giant grin he was sporting. He was woken by a powerful shake and Jiraiya's voice ringing in his ears. Naruto grumbled and fought to open his eyes. He was getting better but would never be a morning person. "I need you awake, boy, quick." The toad sage, an undercurrent of urgency that immediately helped Naruto start his brain. What is it? Your girl is missing," explained the white-haired man. "Sasama? What happened?" "She's been abducted," Jiraiya said grimly. Naruto felt his eyes widen for a second before he narrowed them forcefully and gritted his teeth in a snarl. "What? Who?" The toad sage's glance was more meaningful than 100 words. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.